Sí.
Sí, ok. Pues muchas gracias, Javier. El paper que Nuria y yo presentamos hoy es un artículo o un paper que sería pues también uno de los productos de este proyecto del Ministerio sobre comitología que os he hablado antes. Nos hemos juntado, Nuria, sus trabajos previos sobre el Consejo y yo sobre comitología para hacer una contribución conjunta. El título del paper lo tenéis ahí, es Unveiling Inconsistency, Consensus and Contestation Along the Council Comitology Cycle of EU Policy Making. Entonces, las preguntas que planteamos en este paper son básicamente dos, que están obviamente interrelacionadas. La pregunta que planteamos es hasta qué punto los Estados miembros actúan de manera inconsistente a lo largo de la elaboración de las políticas públicas europeas y concretamente a lo largo de lo que sería la fase en el Consejo y la fase en comitología, ¿no? La pregunta que planteamos es, ¿actúan de manera inconsistente los Estados miembros a lo largo del ciclo Council-Comitología? Y en segundo lugar, si tal inconsistencia existe, ¿cómo podemos explicarla? ¿No? ¿Cuáles serían los factores explicativos que permitieran explicar esta posible inconsistencia? Entonces, esta pregunta que planteamos, ¿cuál es su interés? ¿No? Pues desde nuestro punto de vista tiene dos tipos de intereses. En primer lugar, un interés empírico, que es esta idea que ya ha sido trabajada por algunas personas en la literatura, pero no tanto, que es la idea esta de enfocar lo que sería la toma de decisión europea y, como decía antes, la elaboración de las políticas públicas europeas desde una perspectiva comprensiva, ¿no? Es decir, en lugar de focalizarnos en lo que hace una institución principal o una institución de segundo nivel europeo, como podrían ser los comités de comitología, pues esta idea de focalizarnos en, o de utilizar un enfoque multinivel, mirar qué se produce en distintos momentos del proceso de elaboración de las decisiones, ¿no? En este caso nos focalizamos en el Consejo durante la fase legislativa y en la fase reglamentaria o regulatoria nos fijamos en los comités de comitología. ¿Por qué estas dos fases? Bueno, porque lo que queremos trazar o lo que queremos observar es precisamente el comportamiento de los Estados miembros, obviamente en las instituciones donde están representados, ¿no? Por lo tanto, el Consejo y los comités de comitología. No entramos a nivel de Consejo Europeo porque se mueve por otras dinámicas. Y en particular queremos focalizarnos en cómo se comporta desde el punto de vista del comportamiento electoral, o sea, de las votaciones, ¿no? Por lo tanto, nos focalizamos en no tanto en las negociaciones, sino en los resultados de las votaciones. Eso sería, digamos, el interés a nivel de enfoque empírico. Y luego a nivel teórico pensamos que este trabajo tiene un cierto interés porque permite elaborar o contribuir a, digamos, dos debates que están en la literatura. El primero, que tiende a analizar la comitología como una extensión, ¿no? En una perspectiva racional, pues una literatura que tiende a decir que los comités de comitología pues aplican las mismas pautas de conducta que los Estados miembros en el Consejo, ¿no? Por lo tanto, la comitología como prolongación del brazo del Consejo a nivel regulatorio. Si esto fuese así, sería de esperar que el comportamiento en ambas instancias debería ser similar, ¿no? Si la comitología es una prolongación del Consejo, las dinámicas en comitología, una prolongación de las dinámicas operantes a nivel del Consejo, pues sería de esperar que el comportamiento de los Estados miembros sería el mismo en las dos instancias. Y por otra parte, también queremos anclar nuestra contribución en una literatura que pone de manifiesto las diferencias que pueden existir entre lo que sería la deliberación, la negociación, el proceso de toma de decisión y la decisión en sí, ¿no? Y en particular queremos distinguir entre lo que sería la fase deliberativa, negociadora, y lo que sería el momento de votar. Por lo tanto, nuestro paper a nivel teórico iría a beber de estas dos literaturas, ¿no? El marco teórico que da pie para luego formular nuestras hipótesis y para estudiar esta pregunta de la inconsistencia del comportamiento de los Estados miembros, pues para analizar esta inconsistencia, lo que hacemos es observar cuáles son los modos decisorios prevalentes en el Consejo y en los comités de comitología, ¿no? Y observamos que la literatura nos dice que en general lo que prevalece como dinámica deliberativa y también decisoria sería esta idea del consenso, ¿no? Es decir, que las dinámicas decisorias europeas intergubernamentales son fundamentalmente consensuales y que la contestación o el disenso es claramente minoritario, ¿no? No obstante, también hemos visto en la literatura que se suele decir que hay una diferencia entre la fase negociadora, donde puede haber contestación, y la fase de la votación, cuando los Estados miembros son mucho más reacios a, digamos, hacer explícito el disenso que pueda, o la oposición que puedan resentir respecto a la decisión adoptada, ¿no? Entonces, este debate sobre si lo que prevalece como dinámica deliberativa es el consenso o el disenso, la constatación o, digamos, el acuerdo en la academia de que en general la dinámica que prevalece es el consenso, que puede haber contestación, pero que esta contestación no se hace explícita, al menos en el momento de la votación, aunque se observa en los últimos años y algunos trabajos van en este sentido, decir que con la crisis, etcétera, los estados son cada vez menos reacios a hacer explícita la oposición, pero bueno, dentro de esta dinámica consensual con carácter general, pues también se plantea hasta qué punto esta realidad o esta constatación es trasladable a la fase reglamentaria, a la fase de los comités, ¿no? Es decir, los debates vigentes a nivel del Consejo han sido replicados a nivel de la comitología, ¿no? Entonces, la cuestión de cómo los estados se comportan, si siguen unos líneas de conductas más consensuales o más contestatarias, y hasta qué punto se puede hacer esta replicación a nivel de la comitología, para intentar ilustrar esta pregunta. También nos basamos en la teoría la teoría no solo europea, sino en general lo que se ha aportado en la literatura sobre la delegation theory, ¿no? La teoría de la delegación. ¿Por qué la teoría de la delegación? Bueno, porque la comitología, en esencia, por naturaleza, hace referencia a esta delegación del poder, tanto desde el punto de vista de los propios comités que representan a los Estados miembros, como de la Comisión Europea, que es la monitorizada, ¿no? En comitología, que es la que ejerce los poderes delegados, pero bajo la supervisión de los Estados miembros. Entonces, aquí lo que hacemos es explorar la capacidad explicativa de argumentos que han sido aportados por la literatura sobre delegación para explicar esta secuencia decisoria para comparar y explicar esta secuencia decisoria a nivel de consejo y de comitología, ¿no? Y fundamentalmente en los debates sobre la teoría de la delegación nos centramos en tres corrientes o en tres elementos que son los que luego nos darán pie para formular las hipótesis que os presentará ahora Nuria, ¿no? Por una parte, la variable, que sería como variables independientes, la variable de la contestación en fase legislativa, ¿no? ¿Qué pasa cuando en el Consejo hay contestación? En primer lugar, si hay muchas veces contestación y en el caso de que haya contestación, esto ¿qué puede provocar? La otra variable que analizamos es el cambio de las preferencias de los Estados miembros a lo largo del tiempo, ¿no? Asumimos que si pasa mucho tiempo entre, o hay cambios de gobierno, o pasa el tiempo entre la votación en el Consejo y la votación en comitología, pues queremos explorar si esto tiene un impacto a nivel de cambios de preferencias y a su vez en la cuestión de la consistencia, de la inconsistencia. Y finalmente introducimos también un elemento que está muy en la literatura sobre comitología, que es el tema de los procedimientos, ¿no? ¿Hasta qué punto cuando el legislador, el Consejo, elige en el acto legal de base un procedimiento concreto de comitología para supervisar las competencias delegadas a la Comisión Europea, hasta qué punto detrás de esta elección racional del actor legislativo pues hay un condicionamiento futuro, digamos, de esta relación entre decisión en el Consejo y decisión en comitología. En fin, lo que hacemos es establecer un poco primero la justificación empírica de basarnos en este doble nivel y en segundo lugar ir a tomar de la literatura, digamos, el marco teórico que nos permitirá elaborar las hipótesis que ahora os presentará Nuria.
Vale, pues yo os voy a presentar las hipótesis. Bueno, sabemos de la literatura, de la abundantísima literatura sobre delegación más clásica en Estados Unidos y en la Unión Europea, que hay diferentes condiciones que facilitan la desviación de la política, el policy drift, ¿vale? Entonces, nosotras derivamos hipótesis de algunos de estos argumentos que os voy a presentar ahora. En primer lugar, como sabemos por estudios previos, cuando hay conflicto legislativo, los actores ejecutivos tienen más capacidad para ejercer sus funciones de manera discrecional. Tienen más capacidad para usar o para maximizar su conocimiento, su expertise y, en definitiva, para generar soluciones o políticas más eficaces. Por tanto, creemos que también para generar consensos. Si esto es así, esperamos que la contestación en el Consejo dé lugar a consenso o resulte en consenso en comitología y, por tanto, en un resultado inconsistente, ¿vale? La segunda hipótesis pone el acento en los cambios de gobierno. También sabemos que cuando cambian los gobiernos, estos tienen menos capacidad para controlar la política, las políticas en la fase ejecutiva. Trasladado a nuestro estudio, lo que queremos ver y lo que esperamos es que cuando se producen muchos cambios de gobierno en los Estados miembros entre la votación en el Consejo Legislativa y la votación del borrador de acto de implementación en comitología, la inconsistencia aumenta, ¿no? Porque creemos que es más probable que los resultados sean consistentes cuando las preferencias nacionales entre una votación y la otra se parecen, y más inconsistentes cuando no se parecen. La tercera hipótesis mira a ver lo que explora es si el cambio de gobiernos, el cambio en las preferencias de los gobiernos nacionales, si ese efecto sobre la inconsistencia de alguna manera se ve afectado por el hecho de que haya contestación en el Consejo. La idea es que si hay contestación en el Consejo, será más fácil o quizás más probable para los comités de comitología desatascarlo o desactivarlo y, por tanto, generar una solución consensuada, ¿vale? Porque las preferencias han cambiado mucho entre la votación en el Consejo, que era conflictiva o que expresaba conflicto, y la votación en comitología. La cuarta hipótesis pone el acento en el grado de restricciones del instrumento de control del Ejecutivo y, en nuestro caso, en el procedimiento de comitología. Quizás una expectativa inicial nos llevaría a esperar que un procedimiento muy restrictivo, que impone muchas restricciones a la Comisión, fundamentalmente, daría lugar a resultados más consistentes porque el Legislativo y el Consejo en concreto ejercen mayor control sobre lo que está sucediendo en comitología. Creemos que esta relación no está nada clara y esperamos el resultado contrario, es decir, que con procedimientos más estrictos se incremente la inconsistencia. Y el argumento sería que cuando el legislativo, que es el Consejo y el Parlamento, también porque hablamos de codecisión, eligen un procedimiento de codecisión muy restrictivo, asumimos que lo hacen porque hay intereses nacionales, porque hay muchos intereses nacionales en juego, porque la política es muy relevante, porque los stakes son altos y porque probablemente anticipan que que la Comisión pueda tener preferencias diferentes. Por tanto, para ejercer eligen un procedimiento de comitología más estricto cuando hay más incertidumbre respecto a las negociaciones y al resultado de esas negociaciones. Por tanto, si hay mayor incertidumbre respecto a lo que puede pasar en la fase de negociaciones y en el momento de la votación, creemos que también es más probable la inconsistencia entre los dos votos. Y finalmente, en la última hipótesis, queremos ver si el efecto del procedimiento más o menos restrictivo sobre la inconsistencia varía en función de si observamos si se ha producido conflicto legislativo en el Consejo. ¿Vale? Entendemos que es más probable revertir el conflicto que se produjo en el Consejo cuando se elige un procedimiento poco restrictivo, porque los stakes son más bajos. ¿Pasamos? Ana Mar.
Está tan concentrada en tu presentación.
Sí. Vale, para realizar este estudio hemos creado una base de datos que tiene casi 2.500 votos de comitología, que se refieren a 176 votos del Consejo, adoptando legislación bajo la codecisión. Hemos seleccionado actos legislativos de codecisión porque, observando la codecisión, podemos observar, dado que la codecisión exige una mayoría cualificada y no una unanimidad, podemos observar resultados en los que se produzca unanimidad y en los que no se produzca unanimidad. Por tanto, se produzca contestación, votos en contra o abstenciones. Nuestra variable dependiente es inconsistencia entre los votos del Consejo, el resultado de las votaciones en el Consejo y en comitología. Y esa variable es una variable binaria que tiene valor 1 cuando encontramos en una instancia unanimidad y en la otra contestación, ya sea Consejo, comitología, comitología, Consejo, y tiene valor 0 cuando encontramos ya sea unanimidad en las dos instancias, ya sea contestación en las dos instancias. Vale, en esta tabla podemos ver un poco los 4 escenarios o las 4 combinaciones de unanimidad-contestación en el Consejo y comitología, y podemos ver en rojo son aquellas observaciones en las que se da inconsistencia, es decir, en una instancia contestación y en la otra unanimidad, o viceversa, en una instancia unanimidad y en la otra contestación, ¿no? Por tanto, el patrón dominante es el de contestación-unanimidad, contestación en el Consejo, unanimidad en comitología. Vale, para las variables independientes, ¿cómo las operacionalizamos? Bueno, contestación en el Consejo es una variable binaria que toma valor 1 ante, esto no está muy bien expresado aquí, ante la ausencia de unanimidad, es decir, hay votos en contra o abstenciones, y toma valor 0 cuando no hay contestación, es decir, cuando hay unanimidad, cuando se adopta el acto o la votación da como resultado unanimidad en el Consejo. Para cambios de gobierno hemos contado el número de cambios de gobierno en los 28
¿Puedo hacer una pregunta, Nuria?
antes de Croacia, Estados miembros, entre el voto en el Consejo y el voto en comitología.
Nuria, Javier quiere hacer una pregunta.
Sí.
Sí, quería hacer una pregunta, porque la operacionalización de contestación os habéis fijado solamente en el voting stage, no en lo que pasa antes.
No miramos lo que pasa antes, solo comparamos resultados de votaciones. Comparamos voto, no lo comparamos, no es nuestro foco, aunque estaría muy bien poder analizarlo, ¿no? Pero nos focalizamos en la votación en el Consejo de adopción de legislación, la votación final, y la votación en comitología, de adopción del draft de Implementing Act, ¿vale? Y comparamos. Vale, y el tercero es una variable, la tercera variable es categórica, el procedimiento de comitología, de menos a mayor. Advisory es consultivo, impone menos constricciones, examination y escrutinio imponen más constricciones, escrutinio un poco más que examination. Luego, si tenemos alguna duda, podemos aclararla. Hemos incluido algunos controles que, bueno, si queréis luego los comentamos, pero creo que podemos pasar a los resultados. Vale, debido a la estructura multinivel de nuestro dataset, en el que los votos de comitología están agrupados en actos legislativos, hemos realizado un análisis multinivel, un análisis de regresión multinivel, con random effects al nivel de actos legislativos. Y como nuestra variable dependiente es binaria, pues hemos hecho una regresión logística multinivel. Aquí en amarillo os he marcado los coeficientes que son significativos. A primera vista los comentamos, podemos ver que contestación legislativa incrementa la inconsistencia en todos los modelos. Cambios de gobierno también vemos, aunque el efecto, estos son odds ratio, ¿vale? El efecto no es muy alto, pero bueno, es positivo. Desaparece cuando introducimos las interacciones, pero bueno, luego veremos graficado el efecto de todo esto. Y también que los procedimientos más restrictivos generan más inconsistencia respecto a nuestra categoría de referencia, que es advisory. ¿Pasamos? Vale, para ver un poco mejor el efecto de estas variables sobre la inconsistencia, hemos graficado primero en esta transparencia la probabilidad predicha de inconsistencia para cada una de las tres variables independientes. En la primera gráfica vemos que cuando hay contestación en el consejo, la probabilidad de inconsistencia triplica la probabilidad de inconsistencia cuando se da unanimidad en el consejo, ¿vale? Por tanto, esto confirma nuestra idea y un poco la idea de la literatura, ¿no? Que la contestación legislativa incrementa la inconsistencia. En la segunda gráfica vemos la probabilidad de cambios de gobierno, mínimo de 0, máximo de 77 cambios de gobierno, sobre inconsistencia. Y también vemos que las diferencias entre ningún cambio de gobierno entre las dos votaciones y el máximo de cambios de gobierno son significativas estadísticamente, ¿no? A mayor cambios de gobierno, mayor número de cambios de gobierno, mayor inconsistencia observamos. Y la tercera gráfica sobre el tipo de procedimiento y sus propiedades restrictivas, vemos que los consultivos generan menos inconsistencia que los de examen o escrutinio, si bien los coeficientes los intervalos de confianza, perdón, ligeramente se solapan. ¿Pasamos? Vale, y aquí en esta gráfica vemos graficadas las dos interacciones, la hipótesis 3 y la 5. ¿Vale? Vamos a la primera. Aquí lo que estamos mirando es el efecto de cambios de gobierno sobre inconsistencia cuando hay unanimidad en el Consejo y cuando hay contestación en el Consejo. Unanimidad, la línea azul, contestation, la línea roja. Entonces vemos que cuando hay unanimidad en el Consejo, el hecho de que haya muchos o pocos cambios de gobierno no afecta para nada o significativamente la inconsistencia. Pero sí lo hace cuando hay contestación, conflicto en el Consejo. Vemos que si hay conflicto en el Consejo, a mayor número de cambios de gobierno, mayor probabilidad de inconsistencia. Es decir, un poco la interpretación que hacemos, que la sugeríamos en la hipótesis, es que cuando hay contestación en el Consejo y a lo largo del tiempo entre el momento entre el voto en el Consejo y el de comitología se han producido muchos cambios de gobierno y por tanto han cambiado mucho las preferencias de los gobiernos, es más fácil o es más probable que los comités puedan alcanzar una solución unánime y por tanto desbloquear el Consejo. El conflicto, perdón, esa es nuestra interpretación. Bueno, y la siguiente gráfica examina para cada uno de los tres tipos de procedimiento de comitología si el efecto es diferente cuando hay unanimidad y cuando hay contestación en el Consejo. Y aquí los resultados están menos claros, no podemos confirmar de manera robusta nuestra hipótesis. Sí que vemos que en los procedimientos consultivos, cuando hay unanimidad, hay menos inconsistencia y es significativamente diferente a cuando hay contestación, y lo mismo pasa para el procedimiento de examen. Sin embargo, no hay diferencias significativas entre procedimientos, que es lo que más nos interesaba ver. Bueno, y ahora Ana Mar va a presentaros
Sí.
brevemente las conclusiones.
Las conclusiones. Gracias, Nuria. Bueno, pues aquí para resumir un poco el punto de llegada, bueno, el punto de partida y el punto de llegada, ¿no? Aquí la idea era un poco ver qué podemos aprender o qué podemos aportar al estudio de cómo se toman las decisiones europeas, adoptando esta perspectiva comprensiva, multinivel a nivel institucional europeo, de manera a no centrarnos, que es lo que suele hacer la literatura, en el desmenuceo de una institución en particular, sino de hacer una especie de tracking de la toma de decisión por parte de los mismos actores, pero en diferentes momentos, ¿no? Y esta pregunta, como decía al principio, es relevante porque a veces se dice en comitología que el legislador se pone de acuerdo sobre el marco general, etcétera, etcétera, pero que the devil is in the detail, y el detail viene en la fase regulatoria en estos comités hiperespecializados que toman realmente lo que sería aprueban, digamos, los reglamentos de aplicación de la legislación, ¿no? Entonces, lo que vemos de este estudio, donde intentamos ver cuáles son los drivers, ¿no?, de la inconsistencia, es que definitivamente lo que sería, lo que parece tener un impacto es el conflicto en la fase legislativa, o sea, la contestación en el Consejo es uno de los factores que mejor explican lo que sería esta fase inconsistente en la toma de decisión. Debemos decir que cuando decimos inconsistencia no es ni peyorativo ni negativo, sino simplemente poner de manifiesto de que, contrariamente a lo que suele apuntar la literatura, de que la comitología replica lo que pasa en el Consejo, pues aquí observamos que el comportamiento puede ser distinto, ¿no? ¿Y esto qué lo explica? Pues lo puede explicar la contestación, o sea, el conflicto en la fase legislativa. También hemos visto que el cambio de preferencias a lo largo del tiempo de los actores gubernamentales también tiene un impacto, y que los procedimientos de comitología también tienen un efecto, ¿no? Vemos que, en particular, la inconsistencia entre los dos momentos de elaboración de las políticas públicas, la inconsistencia aumenta cuando hay conflicto en el Consejo y que se producen muchos cambios en las preferencias de los gobiernos, ¿no? Y también hemos visto, también volviendo a la primera tabla, donde veíais que el pattern dominante sería esta contestación unanimidad, o sea, contestación en el Consejo y reversión del conflicto en la comitología, pues vemos que esto sería el pattern dominante en cuanto a esta modelización, si queréis, de la inconsistencia. En definitiva, nosotros lo que queremos apuntar aquí es que, a la hora de analizar cómo se elaboran las políticas públicas europeas a nivel europeo, pues es interesante fijarnos en varios momentos en los que intervienen los distintos actores europeos, ¿no? Y en ese sentido pensamos que esta puede ser una contribución interesante para un poco ahondar en estas dinámicas decisorias, y también pensamos que también aporta algo desde el punto de vista de la transparencia de los procesos decisorios, ¿no? No hemos dicho durante la presentación, no podemos comparar los votos individuales de lo que vota España en el Consejo y en comitología, porque en materia de comitología la toma de decisión es mucho más opaca, no hay los votos de los Estados miembros no son públicos, o sea, tenemos los resultados agregados, pero no tenemos los votos particulares de los Estados miembros, lo cual hace imposible la comparación entre Estados miembros, pero sí que se puede comparar al menos lo que sería el final result. Y yo creo que más o menos esto es todo, y estamos a vuestra disposición para comentarios y preguntas.
Muchas gracias, Ana y Nuria. Habéis estado on time, habéis estado 25 minutos, que es lo que habíamos pactado, ni un minuto más. Por tanto, os agradezco vuestra disciplina. Ahora vamos con Ana y con Audea, que son los dos reviewers, y luego abriremos también. ¿Podéis cerrar, por favor, la presentación para vernos las caras? Si
Perdón,
es
sí, ahora mismo.
¿Voy yo, Andrea, o prefieres hablar primero? ¿Sí? Venga, pues voy allá. Bueno, gracias Nuria, Ana, por la presentación y felicidades por el trabajo. Intentaré ser concreta, concisa y breve en mis comentarios por dos motivos. Primero, porque pienso que el paper ya está bastante avanzado, o sea, yo creo que está bastante pulido a nivel teórico, metodológico. Hay algunas cuestiones que son las que comentaré, que se pueden debatir, pero bueno, yo creo que es un trabajo que no, o al menos la sensación es que no lo acabáis de empezar. Y el otro es porque este tema también a mí me coge un poco lejos en mi ámbito de investigación, y también para dejar espacio a que otras personas que igual tienen más conocimiento de esta literatura pueda aportar comentarios, ¿de acuerdo? Bueno, a mí el paper me ha parecido muy, muy interesante. Creo que es original. En la introducción explicáis muy bien esa contribución que hace, ¿no?, de intentar unir estas dos líneas del EU Policymaking Process, ¿no? Entonces, yo creo que la introducción estaría bien también enganchar un poco más al lector, porque la sensación que da cuando lo lees es que explicas todo el rato que hay que esperar consenso, porque en los dos ámbitos predomina el consenso. Entonces llega un punto que te preguntas, ostras, pues si la inconsistencia es tan poco probable, ¿por qué deberíamos esperarla? Entonces yo creo que en la introducción dar algún dato empírico, ¿no?, en el sentido de, a pesar de que no debemos esperar esta consistencia, lo que encontramos es que en un 50% de casos existe. O sea, ya desde al principio de la introducción esto engancharía mucho más al que está leyendo, porque si no te pasas un tiempo en plan, no sabes. Entonces, por esto ¿para qué lo analizamos, ¿no? O sea, intentar dar algún dato así más contundente. Y también en la introducción yo enfatizaría un poco más las consecuencias de esa inconsistencia, ¿no?, también para hacerlo un poco más atractivo, porque es algo sobre lo que habláis al final, en las conclusiones de estas implicaciones en Democratic Accountability, el papel de los funcionarios, pero yo creo que también sería interesante en la introducción hacer algún apunte sobre esta cuestión. Y también igual sería interesante para gente, como yo, que os digo que no soy súper experta en este ámbito, aportar algún ejemplo concreto de en qué circunstancias o cómo es posible que pase esta inconsistencia, pero con un ejemplo que se entienda bien, porque si no, puedes tener la tentación de pensar, ostras, vale, no hay un voto que sea igual en el Consejo y en comitología, pero claro, en realidad se están votando cosas distintas. Porque puedes pensar, ¿no?, en el Consejo, en el paper lo argumentáis, a veces lo que se hace es llegar a un acuerdo de mínimos, porque no hay acuerdo, y se dejan otras cosas para la implementación, ¿no?, para la fase más regulativa. Pero claro, luego te planteas, o sea, si alguna de estas votaciones más concretas se hubieran planteado, ¿no?, igual en el contenido de la legislación, también la votación hubiera sido distinta, ¿no? O sea, realmente te planteas si hay se revierte el voto, o es que en realidad el voto es sobre cosas tan distintas que al final no se está votando sobre lo mismo. No sé si me explico, pero a veces, bueno, yo he visto esa inconsistencia y creo que si pusierais un ejemplo en la introducción ya, igual quedaría más claro. Vale, sobre las hipótesis. La primera hipótesis, esa de que se espera más inconsistencia cuando hay contestación en el Consejo. Aquí creo que es muy relevante la pregunta que ha hecho Javier, ¿vale? Esto de si lo medís con el voto, porque también sabemos que hay asuntos sobre los que hay contestación, pero que al final se acaba votando mayoritariamente a favor. Entonces, no sé si sería conveniente controlar por la politización de estos asuntos. Intentar desarrollar algún indicador de politización que podría ser si el objeto de regulación ha aparecido, por ejemplo, en los medios de comunicación, ¿no?, para tener algún otro indicador que no sea solo esta fase final de voto. O en cualquier caso, en la argumentación, intentar explicar un poco más las bases de esta contestación, ¿no?, o en qué circunstancias es más probable que se produzca, para que la hipótesis igual sea un poco más clara. La segunda, sobre el tema del impacto en el cambio de gobierno a nivel nacional. Bueno, yo creo que es interesante que tocáis estos dos niveles, ¿no? Cosas que pasan a nivel europeo, y esta variable que introducís más de factores a nivel doméstico me parece muy relevante. Pero claro, aquí estáis asumiendo que siempre que hay un cambio de gobierno habrá un cambio de preferencias, ¿vale? Esta es una assumption que, de acuerdo, se puede asumir. Pero luego me planteo dos cosas. Una es la importancia de los issues. Bueno, aquí es un poco de deformación profesional, porque como yo soy de agenda setting, lo de los issues siempre me parece importante. Pero decir, bueno, a pesar de que haya un cambio de gobierno, sabemos que hay algunos issues donde el conflicto o el impacto de la ideología siempre es mayor que en otros issues. ¿Vale? Entonces, no sé si tener en cuenta o diferenciar por issues podría ser de ayuda. Otra variable es el tema del perfil más o menos euroescéptico de ese gobierno, ¿vale? Porque puede haber un cambio de gobierno, pero si pasamos, ¿no? de un gobierno, ¿no? que es más favorable a la integración a un gobierno con más partidos euroescépticos, el efecto debe ser mayor, ¿vale? Entonces no sé si controlar por el nivel de euroescepticismo de los gobiernos podría tener algún sentido. Vale, sobre la metodología, vale, decís que os basáis en la codecisión porque os permite hacer este control. Bueno, no sé hasta qué punto serviría tener en cuenta también el método intergubernamental para ver, o sea, ni que fuera como mecanismo de control, ¿no? Pero bueno, ya entiendo que igual esto implica mucha más codificación, ampliar la base de datos. En las regresiones, una cuestión que me parece importante es que usáis interacciones, pero yo, según tengo entendido, y tal como establece en este famoso artículo de Brambor et al. Sobre interacciones, siempre que pones una interacción hay que poner como variable independiente las dos variables que están en la interacción, ¿vale? En este caso, Unanimity Council y Government Turnover, y Unanimity Council debería estar también como variable independiente en el modelo, ¿vale? Entonces, yo, si no lo he visto mal, no la ponéis. Y eso igual tendría que corregirse, porque también te permite controlar más el efecto que puede tener la otra variable. Vale, ¿qué más? No sé si dentro de las variables de control, o una cosa que me ha venido a la cabeza mientras hacías la presentación, es si no tendríais que tener en cuenta el tiempo que pasa entre las votaciones, ¿no? Porque cuanto más tiempo pase, también es posible que, además de un cambio de gobierno a nivel nacional, haya pasado algo más, pues a una crisis económica, una pandemia, algo que haya hecho que las preferencias de los gobiernos, incluso si no ha habido un cambio de gobierno, sean distintas. Entonces, medir ese tiempo igual sería interesante. Vale, ¿qué más? En el gráfico, en la figure 2, claro, en estas probabilidades, claro, en Government Turnover no entiendo por qué va de 0 a 80. O sea, esto entiendo que es una medida agregada porque tenéis en cuenta todos los cambios de gobierno de todos los países. Y pueden ir de 0 hasta 80. Bueno, eso no me había quedado muy claro. Entiendo que es así. Vale, y a ver que no me deje nada. Vale, y también en línea, y ya es lo último, igual me queda algún comentario, pero bueno, ya os lo haría llegar por correo si es que me he olvidado. Luego haré un repaso. Acabo con esta cuestión. Claro, sobre como comentaba antes, te planteas si es que no se votan sobre cosas distintas o muy distintas en el Consejo y en comitología. Igual intentar, y vosotros lo apuntáis al final, hacer un análisis más de contenido de esa legislación que aprueba el Consejo, en el sentido de si es muy específica o es poco específica a la hora de definir el contenido de la regulación, ¿no? Pero claro, esto ya implicaría más un análisis de contenido, y bueno, ya entiendo que son muchos casos. Bueno, lo dejo aquí porque he dicho que no me alargaría demasiado. Venga, gracias.
Me toca a mí. Muchísimas gracias, os felicito por el trabajo. Seré muy breve, muchas de las observaciones que tenía yo ya las comentada a Ana y la comparto, ¿no? Sin duda, yo tampoco soy un especialista de la materia, así que espero poder aportar alguna sugerencia y poco más. Si en el caso de esta mañana, ¿no? En el paper que ha presentado Carlos y Felipe hablábamos de un bebé, aquí leyendo el paper y no siendo un especialista de la materia, pero se ve que estamos hablando de un paper con cierta madurez, porque es muy claro, tenéis una dependent variable que está muy bien definida y todo, digamos, el implante metodológico es a mi modesto parer muy consistente. Entonces, mis observaciones van en tres direcciones. Una es la que comentaba Ana sobre el cambio de gobierno. Yo creo que conseguís el objetivo principal, que es sostener y afirmar que efectivamente ocurre inconsistencia, más de la que nos esperamos, porque los datos confirman, ¿no? Y esto es un primer resultado muy interesante. Ahora, ahí donde veo más, donde tengo más duda es las razones de estas inconsistencias. Y aquí apunto a tres temas. Uno es domestic politics, salience de la cuestión y el factor tiempo. Estoy pensando en mi país, Italia. Cambios de gobiernos muy frecuentes, pero ciertas líneas rojas que a nivel europeo no se superan, mandes que mandes. En el sentido que el cambio de gobierno en sí es interesante, pero la característica del incumbent o del nuevo podría ser también interesante seguir. No sabría decir cómo, pero digamos, incluir un poco en la línea de lo que decía Ana, ¿no? Niveles de euroscepticismo, etcétera, etcétera. Pero, ¿por qué los gobiernos cambian de posición? ¿Por qué hay nuevos actores que ideológicamente piensan tienen otros intereses? ¿O por qué ha ocurrido algo en el medio que hace que se cambie de posición? En términos de salience, aquí tenéis, me preguntaba si sería posible encontrar configuraciones donde la inconsistencia es mayor. Hay cuestiones, hay temas sustantivos, o sea, sectores, ¿no? En los cuales esta inconsistencia es más probable que ocurra que en otros sectores. Y finalmente, la cuestión del tiempo. En el paper, evidentemente, es un paper para especialistas, no hace falta explicar mucho más, pero hace referencia a esta secuencia Council Comitology, que es un poco compleja, la comitología en sí mismo. Ana Mar nos enseña que es bastante compleja entenderla, pero la pregunta desde la ignorancia, ¿cuál es el tiempo promedio de esta secuencia, ¿no? Consejo comitología, para ver si es una ventana suficiente para que ocurran cambios de gobierno también en Estados miembros más estables, saliendo del caso del caso italiano. Y luego me preguntaba, razonando un poco sobre el paper, si hubiera la posibilidad de introducir algún elemento más cualitativos, por ejemplo, seleccionando una o dos directivas y mirando efectivamente por qué ha habido esta inconsistencia, ¿no? O sea, una narrativa no una narrativa, digamos, un análisis que pueda explicar efectivamente que en este caso ha habido un cambio de posición, porque han entrado nuevos actores con referencias ideológicas diferentes, o en otros casos porque ha cambiado el escenario. Entonces, no sé si en este caso una pequeña análisis, no sé, un caso de estudio, estaba pensando 2-3 sectores o 2-3 directivas y ver un poco lo que ha ocurrido. Básicamente son estas, pero repito, desde la ignorancia, no siendo un especialista del tema, se sigue muy bien el recorrido argumentativo que ofrecéis. Así que, repito, mis felicitaciones.
Ok. Antes de que podáis proporcionar alguna respuesta a lo que vamos a recoger más comentarios, si es que los hay.
Sí, Javier, sí puedo.
Sí, claro.
Bueno, Ana Mar y Nuria, fantástico, enhorabuena. Yo creo que efectivamente el no poder discernir dentro del voto de la comitología quién es el que ha votado crea un poco de frustración, porque es verdad que, como bien acaba de decir Andrea, el simple hecho de demostrar que existe inconsistencia ya es un resultado que ya por sí merece la pena este trabajo, pero en las hipótesis vais muy a ciegas, lógicamente. Y bueno, por cierto, entre paréntesis, lo cual me lleva a mí a confirmar o a que me confirméis que cuando habláis de cambio de gobierno no podéis discernir, es que simplemente ha habido un cambio de gobierno en el conjunto de los 27, ¿no? O de los 28, porque como no es que sea un cambio de gobierno del Estado que ha votado distinto en la comitología, porque eso no lo sabéis, sino que se ha producido un cambio en un gobierno que hace que lo introducís en la medición. Bueno, pero claro, lo que nos dice la literatura más interesante sobre o por lo menos a mi juicio, ¿no? Sobre por qué se producen estas cosas, que creo que no es... Las hipótesis que hacéis vosotras son lo más avanzado que podéis conseguir teniendo en cuenta la información disponible, pero creo que me parece que es, bueno, los trabajos sobre todo de Tania Borzel, me parece un artículo en Journal of Economic Studies sobre las distintas, por qué los Estados miembros pueden votar una cosa en el Consejo y luego rectificar en la comitología. Hay una variable muy interesante, sobre todo desde el punto de vista de países del sur, ¿no? que suelen ser europeístas, que suelen ser intervenir al final porque claro, en el Consejo solamente os fijáis en el voto en el Consejo, pero no en los grupos de trabajo, en Coreper. Entonces, justamente hay una tendencia en países del sur, europeístas en general, que suelen tener una forma de coordinar más al final, no son pace setting, no setters, ¿no? Sino que están más al final, que por europeístas tratan de apoyar la decisión de la comisión y suelen tener una visión conciliada. En fin, pero luego, cuando tienen que hacer el downloading, como resulta que tienen más problemas para implementar que los países que han hecho pace setting y que a lo mejor son menos europeístas, pues no es raro que se produzca esta disonancia. O esa sería una hipótesis bastante interesante. Pero claro, no lo sabemos. Entonces, tal vez esto que dice Andrea, y utilizando la metodología de Clemán y de Javier, de entrevistar a la gente en Bruselas para que os cuenten, ya que no lo sabemos, cuáles son estos casos, yo creo que sería interesantísimo. Y daría un paso realmente de altura teórica, empírica, pero también teórica, sobre por qué esto se produce y además con mucho interés sobre países europeístas, pero con dificultades para la implementación, para el downloading y viceversa, que es lo que realmente podría explicar de una manera más interesante la disonancia entre el voto político en el Consejo y luego la resistencia administrativa a la implementación.
Gracias. Nacho, ¿hay alguna otra intervención?
Sí se puede.
Sí, rápidamente, por favor.
Yeah, I would like to do like 3 very short comments. I really like the paper. Thank you so much for your work. I think it's super relevant even for my own research. So thank you so much. I just wanted to give you like 3 very brief proposals to maybe enrich or like strengthen your argumentation. And in particular, when it comes to the operationalization of divide in the council, because I understood that you focus mainly on votes, but there would be another avenue to control for the votes. It would be like the public declaration that member states sometimes release after a decision is taken at the EU level. And some member states, clearly there are different practices when it comes to council votes. Certain member states are more shy to express negative opinions when they know that an outcome is going to be adopted. It is the case of the French permanent representation, at least that's my understanding. So to control for these different types of practices, you could also look at the public declaration, and they are public. So that's definitely data that would be worthwhile, worth for you, I think, to look at. And then I wonder if you could take into account also the fact that within different ministries across member states, sometimes the structure of the ministry is that the one that are in charge of the negotiation, they will be in charge also of comitology, of implementing the negotiation. But sometimes these are two different teams. And if you can see that in certain member states this applies or not, clearly it might have an influence on this inconsistency that you are looking at. So, well, that's basically my maybe a last point. I wonder if you could also see, and I think it's public too, when Council agrees, because sometimes it can be like a B point in Coreper, where you see that there is consensus, but sometimes the consensus is shaped at the level of the ministry, and this shows a certain level of silence as well. So these different levels of agreements, I wonder if you could like mention them in your paper as well. That would be relevant, I think. But that's it. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Clement, for these nice contributions. Juanan.
Ya, muy rápido porque ya además aprovecho para despedirme porque después de esto me voy a la fiesta de Navidad de mi centro.
Muy mal, fiesta no.
Pero es online, es online. Es una pregunta, va un poco más sobre la codificación de la variable dependiente y no estoy muy seguro si, por ejemplo, las implicaciones serían las mismas si la contestación viene del consejo o si viene, en este caso, del comité. Y claro, aquí lo que estoy haciendo un poco es más referencia a la idea o en este marco teórico que tenéis detrás, ¿no? Decís que es delegation theory, pero estaría bien saber un poco si es más una relación de principal agent o de trustor and trustee. Porque dependiendo un poco en esto, el mandato es distinto y también incluso el tipo de facultades que tiene, incluso para estar en desacuerdo con algo que ha hecho, en algo que ha sido delegado. Por eso mismo es, desde el punto de vista teórico, pero también empírico, es decir, si las conclusiones son realmente ciertas, ¿no? Lo que habéis obtenido es realmente cierto, si por ejemplo, si lo adaptamos de una manera más abstracta, creo que el desacuerdo, dependiendo de dónde venga, no sé en qué medida son comparables. Y a lo mejor tienes que desagregar la variable dependiente, porque os puede decir cosas distintas. Pero como ya he dicho antes, esto depende mucho del tipo de teoría del que partáis, de delegation theory. Es principal agent o trustor and trustee. Y el tipo de descripción que tiene. Y esto es un poco el comentario más general que tengo, ¿vale? Y muchas gracias por todo. Gracias, Javier y Francesco. Me tengo que ir. Espero que nos podamos ver la próxima vez en persona. Chao, chao.
Que vaya muy bien, Juan. Bueno, yo voy a hacer también algún comentario. Voy a ser un poco más crítico de lo que se ha hecho hasta ahora, porque hasta ahora han sido ideas. Yo creo que las ideas en general han sido bastante buenas. Yo comparto gran parte de lo que ha dicho Ana y gran parte de lo que ha dicho Clement también. Yo creo que, yo creo que la contribución del paper es muy importante, ¿no? Porque realmente vosotros lo que estáis haciendo no lo ha hecho nadie, en el sentido de que estáis viendo un poco stage by stage en el policy making, y si realmente podéis hacer una contribución sustantiva, realmente es fascinante, ¿no? O sea, porque esto es muy difícil. Pero claro, es muy difícil, o sea, no lo ha hecho nadie porque es muy difícil, es lo que quiero decir. Y es muy difícil básicamente porque yo personalmente tengo dos problemas importantes en el análisis que habéis hecho. Uno es, tenéis 170 y tantos casos, creo que habéis cogido 2008 o 2009 a 2016 o 17, ¿no?
18.
18. Bueno, yo tengo también un dataset completo de esas dos legislaturas y cuando vamos al número de casos que hay unos 600, 700 casos desde los años que habéis cogido vosotras, con lo cual estáis analizando básicamente un 30% de los casos, con lo cual tenéis que tener mucho cuidado cuando hacéis big claims a lo que estáis haciendo, porque en esto me recuerda un poco a Simon Hicks cuando hace roll call voting con 30% de los votos y hace unos big claims espectaculares, ¿no? Entonces, claro, vosotras estáis analizando solamente un porcentaje muy chiquitito o en cualquier caso muy menor, vamos a decir un 30-32% de todos los casos, ¿no? Con lo cual, me parece bien que lo hagáis, pero tenéis que ser intelectualmente honestas y decir que estáis haciendo, o sea, coger, yo si queréis os puedo pasar la base de datos porque la tengo completa, desde 2008 a 2019, 2020, todos los dossiers legislativos que ha habido, votos en el Consejo, votos en contra, y etcétera, ¿no? Aquí también hay un elemento de distorsión por el Brexit. Sobre todo si habéis cogido, porque cuando se ve desde 2015 hasta el 2019, Reino Unido ha sido el país que más votos, o sea, sobre todo los 2 o 3 últimos años, votaba todo que no. Y Francia votaba todo que sí, ¿no? Francia es el país, como ha dicho Clement, que menos vota en contra, lo cual no significa que haya disenso, que decir, o sea, porque aquí también yo creo que hay un problema de medida en la medida que estáis implementando. Y aquí sí que cogería el argumento que ha mencionado Ana Palau, porque yo creo que para refinar esa medida, claro, si cogéis el voto del Consejo, que yo lo entiendo porque es una medida que ya existe en la literatura y que es relativamente fácil, pero claro, y la pregunta no es si es una medida fácil o no, la pregunta es si es una buena medida. Y claramente puede serlo o no puede serlo. Es decir, o sea, yo creo que con más frecuencia no lo es que lo es, en el sentido de que hay una ley no escrita en el Consejo de que se vota sí aunque estés en contra, aunque haya conflicto, ¿no? Con lo cual, ahí os estáis perdiendo una parte importante un poco de la película, ¿no? ¿Cómo se puede solucionar?
Perdón, Javier, yo creo que lo decimos, ¿no? Precisamente,
Sí.
decimos que precisamente porque se observa esta inconsistencia entre lo que tú puedes sentir y manifiestas durante la deliberación y lo que acabas votando.
Si lo decís, pero la medida que cogéis, por eso os lo preguntaba, es la ausencia de unanimidad. Es decir, o sea, que lo que realmente os estáis focalizando en lo que pasa en el voto. Es decir, o sea, y en ese sentido yo creo que la propuesta que os ha hecho Ana Palau creo que es muy buena. Deberíais, una posibilidad sería intentar bueno, ver en qué... Bueno, hay muchas formas de hacer esto. Por ejemplo, una forma de hacerlo muy fácil o relativamente fácil sería, por ejemplo, ir a Agents Europe, porque Agents Europe menciona todos los casos en los que hay conflicto antes del voto, por ejemplo, ¿no? Y ahí podríais ver si los 176 casos que tenéis han sido mencionados por Agents Europe. Y además esto con una búsqueda rápida, yo creo que eso lo podéis mirar, ¿no? Con lo cual, y esto además es un parrafito o sea, que realmente no sería muy difícil el identificar, incluso en estos casos en los que ha habido unanimidad en el voto, en qué medida ha habido conflicto. Ahí podéis... Esa sería una medida, pero otra, por ejemplo, lo que comentaba Ana, que sería ver niveles de politización o de conflicto en las áreas, porque tú, Ana Mar, lo tienes muy bien codificado esto por áreas distintas, con lo cual tú podrías ahí ver en qué medida, por ejemplo, hay áreas que son más conflictivas que otras y, bueno, intentar introducir algún tipo de estimación, ¿no? de controversia por áreas, ¿no? Y coger algún tipo, evidentemente no sería una medida directa, pero es indirecta, pero yo creo que honestamente que incluso siendo indirecta, posiblemente sería mejor que cogiendo o midiendo la abstención por unanimidad, perdón, el voto por unanimidad en la votación final, ¿vale? Y luego, eso de una perspectiva del diseño de la investigación, y luego en el análisis me gustaría, no sé si lo habéis hecho, esto os lo quiero preguntar, ¿sabéis? Yo creo que hay podéis tener un plan de endogeneidad en vuestra primera variable. Me gustaría que hicierais un test de endogeneidad entre vuestra variable dependiente y la primera independiente, contestation in the council, porque claramente ahí podéis tener un plan de endogeneidad de variables. No sé si habéis hecho algún tipo de test.
Lo hemos hecho y no hay.
Vale, pues, pero eso sería interesante porque, bueno, no me he leído el paper entero, lo he revisado el 80%, pero no he visto que lo hayáis puesto, lo del test. Y eso es importante, porque como también es importante, bueno, como en casi todas las investigaciones, mostrar un poco los análisis un poco descriptivos, los descriptivos de la variable dependiente y de las independientes, ¿no? Para ver un poco cómo se pueden relacionar o cómo es la dispersión, etcétera, ¿no? Pero bueno, yo creo que dicho esto, yo creo que el paper honestamente es fascinante, es súper innovador en la literatura, es un paper difícil de hacer precisamente por los constreñimientos que hay en el tipo de datos, y ahí yo creo que la la mejor manera es posiblemente ser un poco creativo a la hora de intentar identificar algunas variables que os puedan proporcionar alguna medida un poquito mejor, ¿no? Ese sería un poco mi comentario. Bueno, yo creo que estamos ya, si queréis hacer alguna intervención, Ana y Nuria.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias a todos. Realmente es una profusión de comentarios, todos más valiosos unos que otros. A ver, contestarlos todos va a ser imposible, pero algunas cosas que se me pasan por la cabeza, ¿no? A ver, nosotros queríamos hacer una comparación entre lo que pasa en el Consejo y lo que pasa en comitología, ¿no? ¿Qué podemos comparar? ¿No? Que sea, digamos, un elemento tangible. Bueno, podemos comparar los resultados finales de las votaciones, ¿no? Sabiendo y reconociendo de que como no podemos desagregar por Estado miembro, pues perdemos algo, ¿no? Pero no obstante, un resultado final de una votación es un resultado final de una votación, ¿no? Claro, a mí bueno, yo en el pasado había hecho algunas entrevistas para temas de comitología y para temas de coordinación nacional de los asuntos europeos por parte de los Estados miembros. Y una de las cosas que me había sorprendido es que precisamente las personas que había entrevistado y que ejercían cargos, digamos, a nivel de consejo, o sea, que podían estar negociando a nivel de consejo, pues me decían que ellos tenían un control absoluto sobre lo que pasaba en comitología, ¿no? A pesar de ser muy especializado, súper técnico, que a lo mejor se dilata en el tiempo, etcétera. Pero no obstante, el mensaje principal es que los ministerios, o sea, los ministros que van al Consejo controlan absolutamente lo que pasa en comitología, ¿no? Y de ahí la pregunta, ¿no? Bueno, pues vamos a ver exactamente qué es lo que pasa, ¿no? Durante esta fase. Sobre el tiempo que pasa, en un momento inicial, Nuria y yo hablábamos del tiempo que pasaba, ¿no? Pero nos parecía que también era una noción un poco endeble y preferimos fijarnos en los cambios de gobierno, ¿no? A lo largo de este tiempo. El tiempo es complicado porque lo que se ve, por ejemplo, es que en diciembre, o sea, personalmente es complicado medirlo porque, por ejemplo, vemos que las votaciones en comitología hay una aceleración a partir de finales del mes de diciembre, ¿no? Como acaba el año, pues de repente las votaciones en comitología son mucho más rápidas, de tal manera que calcular el tiempo que pasa entre el acto legislativo y la votación en comitología, pues no sé hasta qué punto realmente es fiable, porque hay ese fenómeno de aceleración a finales de año, de tal manera que en un día, pues de repente puedes ver ahí un montón de votaciones en comitología cuando, bueno, o sea que no parece haber otra razón, sino que se cierra el año y que hay que acabar y que hay que ir avanzando, ¿no? Sobre el tema sectorial, pues estoy totalmente de acuerdo. Yo creo que sería muy interesante pues un poco ahondar, quizá no en este paper, pero sí a lo mejor introducir algún ejemplo, como decía Ana, pero desde luego ir un poco a profundizar en los ámbitos sectoriales está claro, ¿no? En comitología los ámbitos más conflictivos son desde luego todo lo que tiene que ver con health and consumer protection, la salud, bueno, todos estos temas, la agricultura, el medio ambiente, la energía, son temas muy conflictivos en comitología y estaría bien establecer el paralelismo con lo que pasa a nivel de consejo, ¿no? En este caso no era el objeto, ¿no? Primero queríamos tener una foto general y en el futuro podríamos entrar en un análisis más sectorial y también más cualitativo para ahondar un poco en este tema, ¿no?
Disculpa, Ana, es que tenemos el manual que tiene que marchar enseguida. ¿Podéis sintetizar lo máximo posible?
Una cosa importante sobre los issues, ¿no? La agenda setting, los issues de importancia. Sí que tenemos un elemento y es el hecho de que cuando en el acto de base el Consejo dice voy a ir a la comitología y voy a poner el procedimiento más restrictivo, el súper restrictivo o el más light, eso es un indicador del stake que hay en el acto legislativo. O sea, que sí que es un indicador, el procedimiento de comitología es un indicador de la saliency, si quieres, ¿no? No es lo mejor, pero sí que es un indicador. No sé, Nuria, si quieres...
No, en alguna de las especificaciones que hemos hecho sí que hemos incluido las policy areas. No recuerdo ahora mismo por qué no las hemos incluido, pero bueno, lo volveré
Habíamos
a mirar.
hecho un
Y
control.
nada, una cosa que quería aclarar, Ana, es que es verdad, hay un error en la regresión donde pone Unanimity Council. Primero utilizamos la variable contraria, Unanimity, pero bueno, simplemente es un error, son contestation las dos interacciones. Pero gracias por verlo porque no lo habríamos visto ni leyéndolo 1000 veces.
Y una última cosa para Javier sobre que tenemos un fragmento pequeño. Hay que darse cuenta de que no todos los actos legislativos adoptados en el Consejo producen comitología.
Ni todos son por codecisión,
Ni son
ni
todos
tenemos datos de los resultados en todos los actos de comitología que nos gustaría.
O sea, de lo que se podía encontrar tenemos el 100%.
No,
pero bueno, sí que es verdad que tenemos que ser...
Tenéis que ser transparentes, decir qué porcentaje estáis utilizando de todo lo que estáis utilizando vosotras, porque si no, se lleva a malentendido.
En
y
eso tienes razón, estoy de acuerdo. Vale, pues
bueno,
muchas gracias a todos.
Muchas gracias a los ponentes y, por supuesto, a los discussants también. Vamos rápidamente con Emmanuel, porque Emmanuel tiene muchas ganas de presentar, está a punto de tener que salir, tiene solamente una hora, por tanto, Emmanuel, adelante.
Perdón, yo me tengo que ir, que tengo que ir al cole a buscar a mi hija. Pero muchísimas gracias a todos.
Yo también.
Felices fiestas, feliz Navidad. Adiós, adiós.
Yo también me despido, que a las 4 también recojo criaturas.
Ok, hasta luego.
Felices
adiós,
fiestas.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Adiós.
Chao.
Ok, pues perfecto. Estoy muy contenta de tener, ya veo que sí que vamos a tener suficiente tiempo para presentar este paper. Bueno, este paper, en realidad no hay paper, hay una presentación PowerPoint que ahora mismo voy a compartir con vosotros. ¿La veis bien? ¿Sí? Muy bien. Bueno, solo para introducir este paper, es que inicialmente sí que había un paper que escribimos con mi coautor Michael hace varios años, porque esto está relacionado con un proyecto que en principio hemos acabado, hemos publicado varias cosas, pero bueno, teníamos este paper que habíamos escrito hace varios años, pero que no estaba en listo, no estaba bien para enviar a revistas, y bueno, por varios motivos nunca hemos podido volver a trabajarlo y bueno, y esta conferencia ha sido de hecho la oportunidad de intentar resucitarlo y intentar pues ver qué es lo que podemos hacer con esta idea de paper. Ahora voy a pasar al inglés porque todo va a ser más fácil para mí para presentar esto. Okay. So to introduce this presentation and just to give you a bit of feeling, a flavor of what it is about, I'm just going to bring an example which has been very much has gained very much visibility in the newspaper, which is the Ireland with the Apple case. So this is an article which was published in the Irish Times, I think in 2016. Apple does not need to pay 13 billion euros, Irish tax bill, EU court rules. So here it is about the Irish tax system, which provided some benefits to Apple, and this configuration of tax rules.
Manuel, excuse me, we can't see the changing of the slides. Que no podemos ver qué cambios de las slides. Todavía estás en el título.
Vale. ¿Ahora?
Ahora sí.
Muy bien. Thank you. So yes, there is this tax scheme in Ireland, and the European Union has the Commission, which has many powers in terms of competition rules, competition law, has ruled that this tax scheme, in particular its application to Apple, was illegal state aid. So it was interpreted as illegal state aid by the Commission. And as a result of this commission, the Commission asked Apple to return 13 billion euros to the government of Ireland. So, unsurprisingly, Apple litigated against this decision, so decided to bring this decision to the Court of Justice. But also, which is perhaps more surprising, is that the Irish government did too. And so here, yeah, we have this this headline: Irish appeal of Apple ruling a strange decision. So it might appear at first sight as a strange decision indeed, because the Irish government, without deciding anything, you could even just blame the European Commission for this decision. The implications for Ireland would be 13 billion euros coming back into the coffer of the state. So it can be seen as a strange decision. So the question here is, what does the Irish government expect to win with this appeal? What is the motivation behind this decision to appeal this decision of the Commission? So, and in just before delving really to the kind of answers that we want to give to these kind of questions, some background about this legal proceeding allowing to appeal European decisions. So very briefly, there are 3 different judicial procedures before the Court of Justice of the European Union. 2 of them are very famous, and the third one not so much. So the first preliminary ruling, everyone knows about it, infringement procedure 2, and the third major route for bringing cases before the European Court of Justice is annulment actions. And this is what we are studying. Annulment actions is a legal proceeding which is about getting the CJEU to examine the legality of decisions adopted by the European institutions. So this is the particularity of annulment actions. The actor which is being attacked by these actions are EU institutions themselves. Okay, so and in this broader project, not just in this paper, but in this project that I've done with my German colleagues, one of the main questions that we have asked is why motivates member states' government to raise annulment actions against EU institutions, and we focused also in particular on the actions against the Commission. Okay, so I'm giving very briefly the main results of this project that which we have already published with. So we published a book, and also specifically about the motivations, we published this article in European integration. And here we have identified 3 major motivations to litigate. One is money. In general, these are decisions to litigate again decisions of the Commission, which are kind of sanctions, penalties. In general, it's very frequent in the policies dealing with funds like agriculture policy or regional cohesion funds. When the Commission identifies instances of funds being misspent, it can make decisions to penalize this. So there may be a huge amount of money at stake for the member state. So this is an important decision to litigate in many cases, especially in these 2 sectors, agriculture and cohesion policy. Then we also have decision-making competences, and this is in general this question, this motivation. It's in order to limit the attempts of the Commission to enlarge its own competences. When the Commission makes a kind of extensive interpretation of its own power and makes decisions which for the member states appear as stepping outside of the mandate of the Commission, they may litigate in order to have the court ruling in order to ring fence the competences of the Commission. And the third major motivation is what we called political trust, and this is the one we are particularly interested in this paper. And political trust, so this is the label that we have chosen for this third motivation. But in the publications that we already what we have already published, the label is a little bit vague. Well, I mean, we defined it as this, like governments litigating in order to signal trustworthiness to their constituency. Their constituency may be negatively affected by EU decisions. So the idea is that member states' governments litigate on behalf of the constituency in order to signal its trustworthiness, responsiveness to the constituency. So what we want to do in this paper is to dig deeper into that third motivation and to spell out in more detail the mechanisms at stake in this relationship between the governments and these affected bodies at the national level, and in particular to identify the conditions or the modalities that condition the use of this kind of the incentive to use litigation in this kind of circumstances. So under which circumstances are we most likely to see member states litigating out of this kind of motivation? So in terms of method, what we have done is that we have selected 12 case studies. One case study is one annulment action. We selected the cases in 2 countries, Spain and Germany. While looking at the cases, we also saw that some cases are initiated by regional governments. So we have also included them in the analysis. So we have also cases initiated by the Galician governments, Bayern, and also Saxon government in Germany. So first we have identified all amendment actions raised by national or regional governments in these 2 countries between 2010 and 15. We have excluded from all these cases the agriculture and cohesion funds for the region mentioned before, because we kind of assume that since all these cases are about money, we kind of assume that the motivation is money. So since the idea is to understand better the other motivations, we have excluded these cases from the whole list. And then with the remaining cases, we have randomly picked up 6 cases per country. We've done it was a qualitative investigation with interview. All the data was collected with interviews. And then what I wanted to add, I think the mess was due to the fact that I had 2 versions of the PowerPoint, and I see that the one that you're seeing now is not the very final one. Here it was expected to appear that out of the 12 cases, 5 of them are motivated by political trust. So, well, first meaning that it's a suggestion that political trust is an relatively important motivation for litigation. Okay, now how long have I spoken already? 10 minutes. Okay. So I'm not going to talk about the 5 cases. I just in the PowerPoint prepared 3 slides for presenting just 3 cases, just for you to have an idea of the different possibilities, different configuration of actors that we can meet. A first case is the toys safety case initiated by the German government. So here, the context is the revision of EU regulation about toy safety regulation. And for Germany, this is an issue which is very, very salient. In Germany, the health of their children is super, super important. So the initiation of this revision at the European level triggered a lot of interest and saliency in Germany. So the negotiations have been very much covered by the media, followed by associations. So the negotiation was, very salient and monitored in Germany. In this context, the German government adopted a very strong and ambitious position in the negotiations. They wanted to have high standards. And in fact, the Commission and also other member states were not willing to have such high standards. So, and in fact, in the end, Germany was outvoted. This is what comes next. And about public communication. So what the German governments did in this during the negotiation is that they communicated a lot publicly about this. In fact, the topic was very much followed in Germany, and they showed a very strong commitment to make their best to protect the health of German children, and they would go until the end if needed to defend their position. But in the end, Germany was outvoted. So what happened next? They first wanted to correct this in comitology, but they didn't manage to do so. They tried something else, like asking for exemptions. So there is a there is a kind of procedure which allows a member state to ask for an exemption in order to apply EU law in order to implement higher standards in its own state. And these exemptions were only partly accorded, so meaning that for several important elements, the exemption was refused by the Commission. And the public pressure was still very strong. So everyone in Germany was looking at the Minister for Health and expecting to see what was the next move, the reaction of the minister. So the public pressure was very high, and in the end, the minister decided, after even there was conflict in the government about this, they decided to follow up on the promise that had been made to the constituency in the very beginning of this sequence, that they would go to Luxembourg to fight for to defend the interests of German children. So they decided to litigate. And according to my interviewee, this was clearly a public opinion-driven case. So really as a reaction to public pressure. That's for the first case. The second case is the case about mollusks, and is a case initiated by the Spanish government. So here it might ring a bell to you. Of course, it's nicer to present this to a Spanish-speaking audience than to a random place. Okay, so especially because you will see that there are at stake some questions about tensions between comunidades autónomas and the central government. So in this case, it was about the revision of the methods to detect toxins in mollusks, so mainly mussels, and that kind of things. And the new method to detect the toxin was very detrimental to Galician fishermen for a series of reasons that is not point to explain here. So really the impact for Galician fishermen was meant to be really huge and really bad. So Galicia wanted the central government to litigate on its behalf against this new regulation. But here there was a big problem. The central ministries of agriculture and of consumer protection opposed this for different reasons, but in general here I have to explain how does it work when a region, when a community wants the central state to litigate on its behalf. In general, the request is made informally through the corresponding ministry. So here it would be, in principle, in most cases, it would be either the Ministry of Agriculture who would relay the request of Galicia to litigate, or the Ministry of Consumer Protection. And this is what happens in most cases, and it does not represent any problem. The central ministry endorses the request of the community. But here, for several reasons, both ministries were opposed to this, so they did not want to relay this request. So what happened then is that Galicia had no other possibility than making a formal request through the CARUE. So it's the formal mechanism formal institutional mechanism for the communities to ask the central government to litigate on their behalf. It is not so much used because in general it's the informal mechanism which is used, but in some cases it is. So in this case it has been activated by the Galician government. And here what happened is that then now I had to explain how the decisions are made at the central level about on which cases they decide to litigate or not. The decision is made by consensus. All the ministries are represented. The discussion is led by the state attorneys, and the decision made by consensus. Meaning, if one ministry opposes, well, consensus meaning unanimity, in fact. If one ministry opposes, then there is no litigation. It's really the normal way of functioning of this commission, which make these kind of decisions. So since both ministries were opposed, and one of them was very opposed to litigation, under normal circumstances, the central government would have not accepted to litigate. So it's very surprising that the central government, in fact, decided in the end to litigate on behalf of Galicia. So why? What happened? Well, the context is that the communities have, I mean, at least for the activation of this mechanism to ask the central government to litigate, there is a strong distrust from the side of the communities to the central state regarding the usefulness of the carrier to relay really the interests of the communities, because in several cases in the past, as the communities used this mechanism to ask the state to litigate, the decision was no, so the state refused. So the communities tended to think in the end that it's useless, that the central state does not take their interests into account. So this fomented distrust into this institutional mechanism, and in general into the state's willingness to endorse the interests of their communities before the Court of Justice. So that was the context before this case happened. And in this context, in fact, so toward the interview, explained to me the decision, yes, of the government was clearly to give a signal to the communities. They wanted to show to the communities that the institutional mechanism works, that the carrier is effective, and that yes, they care about communities' interests. So that was the major reason for which the central government accepted to litigate. Then very quickly, the last case about BMW in Saxony. So it's about a big company. So this is the plant for building electric cars of BMW in Leipzig. And here the Saxon government has given 49 million euros aid to BMW to attract BMW on the Saxon territory and to help them building this plant. The Commission was not happy with that, again under its powers in competition policy, and decided to limit the aid to, it could not be more than 17 million. BMW litigates against this decision, and the Saxon government litigated too. And here, what was the main motivation for the Saxon government to litigate? It was important to show support to BMW, to show that we are a good partner. That was the reason why the Saxon government decided to litigate. Okay, so now after I presented the case, just a few words about how we can conceptualize this and identify the conditions for these mechanisms to be activated by the government. So we have the European Union adopting a decision which has a negative impact on an actor, an affected actor, let's say, to simplify this. And then we have a government litigating about the European Union. So under which conditions does this impact on an affected actor induce a government to litigate in order to send a positive signal to the affected actor? So here we need two conditions. The first condition is that the decisions of the EU must hit hard. It must be a strong blow on this affected actor. The examples that we have seen is that in Germany, the health of their children, of the public, so it was really that there was a lot of well, commitment, not commitment, but it was a very salient issue which raised a lot of concerns for the German public. And the German public as a whole, not just like a few people. It was the whole German society who was very concerned about this. The fishermen in Galicia, the impact of the new regulation was very, very strong on the fishermen. And for BMW, it was a lot of money. More, I think it was 32 billion, no, or million, 32 million euros. So that's quite a sum. So that's the first condition. The decision must hit hard on the affected actor. And the second condition is that there must be some kind of dependence between the affected actor and the government. So the affected actor must have some kind of influence on the power, on the capacity, on the, well, the status of the government. In the German case, it was the whole German public opinion which was mobilized around this issue. So of course, here what is at stake for the government is the elections. For the case, the Spanish case, what was at stake was a kind of relatively peaceful partnership and interaction between the central state and the regions. So well, the communities also have the possibility, I think, to influence the Spanish political game. So it's important in this context. It's important for the central state to make sure that they still maintain good relationship with the communities. And in the BMW case, BMW with this new plant is employing a lot of people in Saxony, which is also a state in East Germany, so which economically, in terms of economy and employment, is not super wealthy. So that's also, there is also a dependence relationship. So the argument is this one. These are the two conditions under which the government may have this kind of reaction. It hits hard on an actor which may have an important influence on the government. And in this context, yeah, when we have these two conditions, what can the government do? Can the government ignore this kind of thing? If the government ignores it and does not do anything, it would really destroy the trust relationship between the government and the affected actor. So what the government needs to do in such a case is that they need to show that they care. So the government hits back and decides to litigate against the Commission. But here the key message, the key idea is that the litigation is a signal of trustworthiness. It's really to show that they support you, more than supporting, more than really achieving support, achieving the defense of the interest. It's mainly about showing that they are doing their best in order to protect the interests of the affected actors. Yeah, I have a short slide about the theoretical relevance, but I think I've perhaps already explode the times that I had to talk. Just very quickly, yeah, it brings a bit some information on the resistance to EU policies. There is some literature that says that this resistance to EU policies is in many cases motivated in order to protect the national interest groups, influential national interest groups. So here what we can add is that this, to a large extent, is in fact a signaling game between the government and the interest groups. So it's about showing that they make their best more than about actually achieving protection, or at least to I mean, I'm not saying that the other one does not have an impact, but the showing, the signaling part is very important. And it also brings some insight for the literature on litigation. It's about repurposing litigation. So seeing litigation not just as a judicial tool or even a policy tool, but litigation as a tool for political communication. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, many thanks, Manuel. As you know, we have plenty of time. We have still half an hour for you. So
yeah, that's true. Now I'm thinking, since there are no discussions, we have in fact much more time. So yes. Anyway,
we don't have official discussions, but well, if anyone wants to make any comment about the presentation and these mechanisms so interesting for litigation that Emmanuel is actually showing.
Yeah, I can say a few things. There's not really elaborated comments or reactions on on the presentation. So thank you. And these are also comments from Michael, who is my my colleague in Florence in the school. So it's like I was talking to him, right? So don't take it only you personally. I have a number of questions which are more about the methodological dimension. I think it's useful because it's a starting project. And the first thing I would say is that I would like to hear a little bit more about the justification of case selections, not only because this is needed, but also because you made a very specific choice, which is 2 countries with 2-level governance systems. So the constituency you can identify there is the 2nd level of government. But my question is, what happens when you don't have the 2nd level of government? What is the constituency in which you have to earn this truthness? Are you assuming that is the citizens by and large, the ones that take the place of the 2nd level of government or not? And of course, how this affects the design in terms of selecting perhaps a unitary state via a federal state. And I also would like you to say something about the role of the mechanism of interinstitutional coordination within nation states. And Nacho has written a lot about this kind of things in the Spanish case. So does it make a big difference having something like the Spanish model of conference of autonomous communities for coordination of the position via other kind of models that introduce some kind of divergence, or is irrelevant? What's your expectation about that? And third point also about the case selections is, I think it's important to say something about the time sensibility of this, particularly because one factor that may affect that is party politics. So at least in the Spanish case, the alignment of central government with regional governments may play an important role, right? So I don't know whether in Germany could be the same case, but I would say that in theoretical terms of reflection about the convergence, divergence in terms of parties in both levels of governance will be an important thing to say. Then few other things also on methodology. About interviews, I think will be good that you say how many interviews, with whom, and also how do you treat empirical evidence out of those interviews. And I apologize saying that because my paper was very undeveloped and we are going to do interviews, but I think we need to do this in qualitative research systematically, because sometimes we are a little bit perhaps careless about how we present the treatment of our empirical evidence. And I always suggest to perhaps to do some kind of codification that brings some kind of uniformity in the way you interpret evidence. Another question has to do with the third case that you have selected, which I don't have, I'm not so sure it's an annulment action, right? Because if I got you right, this seems more of a case of a state aid and hence enter competition policy, and hence, I don't know whether you can qualify that at the same level as a standard annulment action, but just for clarification, I'm not sure because you didn't provide really the evidence about that. Finally, last point, which is a more theoretical thing, is to what extent trustworthiness is not a kind of byproduct of any other kind of argument. So money will produce trustworthiness because you show to your electors, your constituency, that you can recover or gain or obtain some money out of the action. And the same happens with competence, or fight about the competence for specific action. Because again, if you show that you can retain the competence that is suitable, what that is you consider appropriate, that creates some kind of trust from your citizens and also from other kind of constituencies. So what I want to suggest is that trust could be a kind of byproduct of the other two arguments that you have in your paper. I finally a last suggestion. I mean, I know that you have already one research design, but I would encourage you a lot to do a single case study, which is forthcoming, and I think will be prototypical for many things, which is the Hungarian challenge, the Hungarian government challenge on the regulation on the RRF. The Hungarian government has already said that they are going to challenge the legality of this regulation, so it will be an annulment action. and they have cornered themselves in a position they cannot do anything else. And probably the court will say that the regulation is legal, and then the Hungarian government has to go for an appeal. So it fits very well into your design. And this of course, we are talking about prospective events, but nevertheless, I think that will be the sequence of events. If that happened, I mean, you could tentatively say, does it fit with the trustworthiness argument? I think it doesn't. It's really a highly protective strategy paradoxically for the government itself. So it's a kind of additional or fourth model of strategic behavior that perhaps should be also integrated theoretical. But that's a suggestion that goes beyond your own paper. No? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Carlos. I very appreciate that you have made so many comments, and also very good comments, in spite of not having read the paper, which in fact does not exist yet. So thanks a lot for this.
I can try to read something that doesn't exist. I mean, no problem. I can do my best for that.
Manuel, I think it's better if you receive all the questions. And I think that Mario wanted to ask you a few questions.
Excellent.
Mario?
Yes. Okay, thanks. I don't have a few questions, just one related to the Spanish case. Since I am also working on the representation of regional interests or Spanish regional interest at the European level, I worked on the carrier system. So I was wondering when this happened, so that the Galician government presented the claim through the carrier system and not through the sectoral conference on agriculture related to EU issues. And the Spanish government accepted the claim because the Spanish government wanted to demonstrate that they trust this carrier system, which is actually a system which is not working on a very frequent level. So if I remember, the carrier met last once a year. So I don't know what is the interrelation or the motivation of the Spanish government to show trust that the system works. I cannot understand it in the German case. If you have a company and so on, you have to show a wide audience that there's a trust, so they have to be active. But to show that the system of the carrier works, or maybe I didn't understand you well on this point. Thanks.
Thank you, Mario. Now we have a comment.
Yes, I have just a very brief comment because I know that you are an expert on telecommunication regulation, and I found quite paradoxical that you chose this example of Apple in Ireland to introduce your argument, because in a way you could argue that litigation is one of the tools in the repertoire of actions of member states to defend their preferences. If they fail in the context of negotiation, then they will start to litigate. And Ireland, clearly in the context of negotiation, well, I would assume that what they tend to advocate against regulation of platform, because it's in their economic interest to host them, to have their headquarters in Ireland, to benefit still from the economic benefits that go with it. So I see that this is kind of consistent with litigating in favor of these tech platforms, because in a way it suits their national interests. So I didn't really see the paradox in a sense. Maybe you could detail it later. And I just wanted to signal also that in the DU dataset, we are covering one negotiation called the effort sharing regulation, which is related to climate. And this is a very good example, once again, of one of the Visegrad member states being outvoted, as you mentioned in the first case, and then starting to litigate against the legislative act. So if you want to expand and not only focus on Germany and Spain, this could be an interesting case as well.
I can't raise my hand because I'm the organizer of the event. Can I also ask something?
Sure.
Yeah, good. I really enjoyed the preliminary idea of the paper, and I hope this develops even more. I was wondering, because what you explained about the research leaves you wanting to know more, And at some point I was wondering, once you get to the point where you need to show the political trustworthiness, right, and you have to go and litigate. But I'm thinking about, for example, the German case where they said, oh, it was a public opinion thing. It would be nice to actually consider some evaluation, you know, exposed to what is going on with the litigation process. If the member state is actually, you know, going to fight all of it in order to bring it through, or if litigation is just a signal per se to show the constituency that they are going to do something about it, but that they're not going really to fight for it. And, you know, there could be different across the different, you know, cases. There could be different set of motivation pushing them to fight for the litigation. I don't know, just an idea.
Can I just add a question very quickly, kind of as a follow-up? To what extent was the German case really a case of public opinion? I mean, yes, sure, yeah. I mean, in terms of like rhetoric and so on, yes, but I mean, there's a huge toys industry in Germany, and I mean, they play a lot with this like, oh, high standards and high quality and not so many chemicals, and you know, we do like wood toys and stuff like that. I mean, you know, even I live in a city where the biggest fair every year is a toys fair, right? So where you have all these people coming in here, so it's a huge economic aspect as well. So I'm just wondering to what extent it was really a case of just, you know, Germans like to have high quality toys, or whether there were also economic motivations. And also we know that this issue of chemicals, I mean, I remember doing these negotiation games at the College of Europe, and where we were kind of seeing that, you know, playing, for instance, with the chemicals in toys has also an effect on trade and what you allow it into the EU and how much you can compete with the Chinese and so on and so forth, right? So I was also wondering about this economic aspect. Hi, Michael.
Oh, hey. I think I have also a very short issue, which is somehow related, but I would like to know why you select the cases as you selected, because I think the case selection could influence the conditions you identify, okay? So I think clearly you should specify the main arguments behind the case selection you are making. I think that is really important. And also, I guess that there could be a lot of variation across countries, across member states, because I'm afraid that also it's not only about how hard or how strong hits one is in one country, but also all the institutional conditions in terms of interest groups, media, and so on are also very important. Okay, so if you really want to explain what is going on in litigation, I think you need like a broad theoretical framework, and to be rather systematic when you are making this kind of case selections, identifying different framings, and so on and so forth. Okay, but because you already have so many questions, and I don't think we have more.
Javier, can I add a little bit more?
Of course, yes.
So just following up on what I said before about case selection, and that fits also into Javier's view. I think one important aspect that you have to consider, at least in the Spanish case, to what extent the central government may be a kind of neutralizer between levels of government, you know, and there is a very important case for that, which is not specific in an annulment action, is more of it fits within the competition policy, but it's an old case. It's the case of the fiscal agreement in the Basque Country that was opposed heavily by the central government, by the regions around the Basque Country, and it was struck down by the court. And the Spanish government, despite being against the regime, appealed to Brussels because was legally obliged to that. So there's this kind of deep embeddedness in the institutional structure that has to be brought also as part of the explanation. So when you were saying before about the Galician case, I don't know the legal details of that, but I wouldn't be surprised that it's a kind of legal obligation to pick up the case if the competence about health related to muscles, what I think, is at the regional level. Then the central government cannot decide not to take it. It's simply the one that decides what to do is the regional government. And I think this factor has to be brought in.
Okay, Emmanuel, now you have time for, answering whatever you want to answer, okay, to these questions.
Okay, so thanks a lot to everyone for all the comments. I've written down everything that you said, so I will also We will also need time to think through all that with Michael. Okay, so what I can answer now is about the case selection. So Carlos and Javier asked about this. The case selection, yeah, I did not specify it in the PowerPoint presentation just for the sake of time, but well, there is a rationale behind it, so I'm not sure it's completely satisfying for you or for the purpose of this paper. So that's definitely something I will think again. That's a case selection that we made earlier in the process of the project. While we were investigating the different motivations, not just this one. So the case selection, the idea was that we wanted to have a the highest possible variety of motivations, because we wanted to identify these different motivations for litigation. So the case selection was meant having that in mind, and we chose Spain and Germany because both countries are countries who raise many amount of actions compared to other countries. So since the number of cases, the volume of cases is higher, we assume that there would be more chances to have more variety of motivations. And a second reason was that we assumed that both countries had a different kind of legal judicial cultures, because they raised a very different number of cases. I think it was in terms of preliminary ruling or in some other area. I leave it up to Michael if he wants to complement on that.
Yeah, that's a terrible position I'm in now, because I was late. I did hear only the last question, so sorry about this. We still have well, a terrible day, but wonderful that I'm here now. Thank you so much for that, Manuel, that you went ahead with everything. I want to say something about case selection, but a bit differently maybe than most of you would expect me now, because we recognize all your concerns in the case selection. You should, however, consider, well, what is case selection? What do we want with case selection? If we had a clear theory about, you know, when this kind of trust or symbolic litigation takes place, then it would make sense in the next steps to systematically kind of try to kind of select the countries, as you say, and also the cases, and then to be able to make conjectures about, you know, okay, we have some variables in that case, some others in that, and make our usual kind of conjectures. I think we are a bit too quick in jumping already to these questions of case selection, because there is still some way to go there. And our approach here was a bit more modest. It's true that this is a general project, a bigger project that had focused on, let's say, money and competence kind of explanations for litigations, or in other words, those that are very more obvious. And we find cases that we could not explain very well with our theory in that bigger project. And we're cutting out them to have a closer look in order to kind of pre-check some patterns. So I'm frankly not sure whether case selection at that stage already would help us a lot, except that because it's more a matter of finding out whether there is a pattern that is worthwhile analyzing more. And once we identified this, then we can go to all this, what you are saying, and then it will be a quite different kind of project. I mean, a kind of add-on. At that stage, it was more about, I don't know how Emmanuel now presented this, I hope I don't contradict this, but this was more kind, we have cases that we cannot make sense out of it, and we suggest to this perspective for a first cut on it. And all the rest comes actually later. But I think the later things cannot be done without this first one.
Okay, thanks a lot, Michael. Well, perhaps, yeah, no, I think it's good that you reminded this. It's indeed key. I mean, it's related to the sequence in which we are in this project. Okay, should I go on with the other questions? Or Michael, is there something else that you want to say or to answer, perhaps based on the last questions that you heard?
I fear it was too late now to catch all the context. Sorry, Emmanuel, I have to leave this to you.
Okay, okay. Okay, so does the interinstitutional coordination mechanism in the member states make a difference? If I understood well your second comment, Carlos. Probably that's something that we have not really looked into, but something that appeared out of the cases is that in Germany the coordination between the regional and central level does not seem to be really problematic, while in Spain it seems to be some time to lead some more tensions. And of course, as you know, I mean, the institutional venues for coordination between regions and central state in Spain are less developed than in Germany. So that perhaps has something to do with this. And in fact, with this, I think I can answer directly one of Mario's question about the carré. So what I understood from the interviewee is that it's not the state wants to say they trust the carriageways, rather the state wants to signal to the communities that the communities should trust the carriage, because the communities are the one who distrust the mechanism. So visibly in this case, the interest of the government was to foster some kind of institutional loyalty of the communities. And what he didn't say, but what we can hypothesize or imagine based on what he said, is that perhaps the state wants to limit the kind of critics that the communities may have on the institutional mechanisms about coordination between them and the central state. So that's what I imagine was behind this, because the communities had voiced their dissatisfaction with the carriageway. So I think this is the logic from the central state, kind of showing that the carriageway works and that they can trust the system, and that they are probably, what he did not say, but what is probably behind it, there's no need to revise this institutional system. The time sensibility about the case selection and party politics, I think it's an excellent comment, and perhaps which it's particularly like makes a lot of sense, particularly in the Spanish context. I'm not sure that in the, well, I don't know, no, but probably also in the German context, whether there are party alignments between the region that asks litigation and the government. Perhaps that helps. This I don't know. This is not something that kind of emerged from the interviews, but that's well, I mean, yeah, it might be interesting to look at this more closely. The interviews with the state attorneys, who are the one who manage the decision-making process about which cases they decide to litigate on or not. And also with the ministries concerned, because all these cases, they start within the ministries. The decisions of the European Union, they come to the ministries, and it's there whether at first there is a reaction. So we asked the ministries, the civil servants who were in direct relation with the European Union and with the case, and also the state attorneys, and also where possible with stakeholders who may have taken part or have observed the situation particularly closely. And the third case about state aid, it is an annulment action, because there are many annulment actions, in fact, directed against Commission's decision declaring something being illegal state aid. So we have a decision of the Commission, and a member state litigates through annulments against this decision of the Commission. And in fact, this pattern is quite frequent. And the extent to which, that's also an interesting comment, the extent to which the other motivations, money and competences may there may be trust, in fact, also behind these other motivations. So that's an interesting comment that goes also, I mean, that echoes a lot of discussions that we've had in the interpretation of the cases. To what extent is there an overlap of the different motivations, empirical overlap in the cases? And so I would say that's not the case. I mean, in general, perhaps in some cases, things might happen as you suggested, but most annulment cases, in fact, they are not visible. They are not mediatized. So the public is not following this case. It's part of the obscure processes and related to the European Union. So it's very, very unusual that a case has a visibility. So in fact, I think that for this reason, the showing, the public communication motivation is not really, cannot be identified in those cases which do not have visibility. Okay, yeah, it's a good idea to look at case with Hungary. And there are many other possible cases which would be very interested to look into. I don't know if we are going to do this, but that may also be a good way to tease the reader into being interested to read the article. Just as I did, as we mentioned the Apple case to kind of introduce the study, and perhaps we can consider looking at well, using one of these more recent cases to trigger the appetite of the reader. Regarding, in fact, the Apple case, that it was perhaps not so surprising. I see your point, and well, in fact, yeah, that was perhaps maybe not the most the best, perhaps not the best introduction to the study, but I think it's not so obvious. I mean, in the Apple case, the Irish government has obviously conflicting preferences. One is money, which is the one I emphasized in the introduction, and another one might be preserving the situation and the attractiveness for multinational companies. So, which is the point that you emphasized. To what extent was a German case of public opinion, the toy safety case? So here, I did not give all the details about the case, but so what I've been explaining is that when they decided to litigate within the German government, in fact, there was a conflict between the minister who wanted to litigate, who was the Minister for Consumer Protection, and the Minister for Industry, who was against litigating, and who was also against asking for exemption to the European Commission in the first place, precisely because he wanted to protect the national German industry, because otherwise his rationale was that having higher standards for the German industry would be bad for German industry. It would lower the competitiveness of the German industry. And in fact, so there was the conflict within the German government, and the public pressure was so high that even the Minister for Industry in the end kind of understood that it was politically very risky for him to push further and to defend the interests of the industry to the detriment of the health of German children. So this is why in the end they decided to litigate. Yeah, I think I answered everything, or nearly everything. If Michael wants to add something. Okay, now just to say, I have to leave at that precise minute. I have until 4:20, like at the very, very last moment for me. Now I have to leave. So I'm going to leave now. Thank you so much to everyone for the great comments and the great discussions. And I have to leave. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks a lot, Emmanuel. Thanks a lot. I stay for you. I stay in.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Emmanuel, but we want to see the paper, okay?
Okay, with pleasure. Bye.
Bye-bye, ciao. Okay, so, well, now we have the last presentation, which is by Ariadna Ripoll. She doesn't have a paper either, but she has a great presentation. She's working on a project in the UI. I think she wants to present something related to that. So Ariadna.
Yes, thanks, Javier. Thanks for the invitation. And yeah, sorry that I don't have a paper, but it's really like work in progress. I started this project in September, and I only have like 4 months of funding. So I've been really trying to get data as intensively as possible. And so that's what I'm going to show today. Okay. Can you see it? Can you see the presentation? Yes, okay. So yeah, so basically this is a project that's been financed by the EUI. And the idea behind was to basically, let me go, to basically look at how the pandemic, so how the COVID-19 crisis might affect the workings of the European Parliament, with the idea that, I mean, if you think about it, the idea of a parliament is to be there to debate, to have democratic debates about policies, about politics. So to meet people, to kind of also communicate these different decisions to the publics. And if the parliament is not meeting, if people are working in a remote way, then how do we expect this to affect the work of the European Parliament, but also its role in interinstitutional relations, so also its role in policy making. And so basically this was my main idea it's a very explorative project. It's also a lot about obtaining data, because we are now in the middle still of this process. So if you have also ideas on how I could take this further in terms of like theory and theorizing this, then I would very much appreciate it. So these were the kind of the overall question, and then the two sub-questions that I had. So basically how the crisis affects the internal workings of the European Parliament, but also how it affects its influence and legitimacy in EU policymaking. So more this interinstitutional dimension. And basically what I've done in terms of data, or what I'm doing still at the moment in terms of data, is first I prepared a qualitative survey that I sent to around 4,000 contacts. And here it's a bit difficult to know exactly how many, because I didn't have a list of assistants of MEPs. So I basically tried to guess their email addresses, and I can't know which ones rebounded and which ones got there. And I let the survey run between the 10th and the 25th of November of this year. And we got around, I think now it's around 360 responses, which is not extremely high, but and I'll show you now the distribution. But I think it's still relatively normal for this kind of surveys to institutions. I mean, I know that, for instance, Brigitte Laffen and Hussein Kassim and so on, they also did something similar with the commission, and they also got like around a 13% rate of response. I mean, in my case, there might be other circumstances of why people didn't respond, and we can discuss this later. And what I'm doing now, also with the help of Alfredo De Feo, who's been or who's now retired, but he's been working in the European Parliament for a long time, is that we've been doing interviews with people who've been following this process. So we focus very much on the EP secretariat, and especially really kind of the higher level. So basically director generals, also secretary generals of the political groups. And we've done around 15 interviews, probably a couple more actually, 16, 17, and it should be around now. And we still have some pending. We also want to do some more interviews with MEPs, but this is always complicated, so we'll see. But I mean, there's a lot of room in the future for further research and going a bit more in depth into specific issues and so on. But we just wanted to understand now at the moment, kind of from the different services, what is the stand now. And of course, complemented this also with a documentary analysis of changes in the rules of procedure and notes of the bureau and things like that. And I'm going to kind of present here rather what I've got until now out of the qualitative survey. You see that it's still very recent and I haven't had that much time to work on it. I mean, I have also someone who's helping me with that. So we've just been trying to sum up some of the main results here. So basically the survey had this structure. So we asked first about the job category. So whether they were MEPs or work for the services of the EP secretariat or for a political group or assistants. And that basically branched out to slightly different kinds of questions, though in all cases, the main structure remained the same. So basically some job related questions about policy field in which I work, or for instance, the committees in which I work, or the functions, for instance, for MEPs, whether they are rapporteurs or coordinators and things like that. The first part focus on their experience with IT solutions. So where were they when the lockdown happened, how satisfied they were with the changes, how good their connections were, and so on and so forth. Then about the quality of contacts, both within the EP, so for instance, for MEPs, how good the contacts were with other MEPs or with their assistants, with political groups and so on, but also with external actors. So for instance, political parties, national parliaments, interest representatives, citizens, and so on. The commission, the council, so all these different external actors. And then there was a set of questions more on influence of the European Parliament, internal dynamics, how important their work, how their work had changed, whether it was more intense or less intense. And in all these cases, we also gave them a chance to explain a little bit their answers. So there was also a part of like text where they could kind of develop a bit more longer explanations. And then in the end, we also added some demographic questions about gender, age, and nationality. Okay, so just some very first impressions. So the figures that we have got at the moment are these. So as you can see, the numbers for the MEPs are relatively low, which is normal because MEPs don't have the time and never take the time to do anything like that, as with interviews and so on. And that's why we want to complement those with interviews, because we know that it's relatively low. I mean, the idea of the survey anyway is not to do like really complicated statistics or anything like that. It's more qualitative. It's more to get some first descriptive impressions. So I mean, for that at least we've got data, so which was what I wanted. For the political groups and the EP General Secretariat and the assistants, the figures are a bit better, especially General Secretariat. And also in terms of the political group distribution, so these, of course, are only MEPs, political group secretariat, and assistants. I think that there, I mean, it's okay. The distribution is quite, you know, it kind of reflects a bit like that the proportions in the European Parliament. I was even pleased that we had some people from the ID group replying, which is surprising. So that the kind of Eurosceptic, hard Eurosceptics, far right actually replied to the survey. So that was actually quite positive. So for the first part, when it comes to IT solutions, so that was kind of asking them how satisfied they were with the assistance that they had got from the EP in terms of finding solutions to the remote work, so to during the lockdown, and you can see that most people were actually happy. I mean, that they were positive. But there is a difference between those working for the General Secretariat and then the MEP assistants and political groups. They were a bit more negative than the others. But in general, people were really insisting on, you know, how good it had been and how quick and so on. And I mean, I did, from the comments that people wrote in the survey, I did this kind of word cloud, and you can see a little bit the issues that came up quite often. So basically, all the issues, problems when related to connections, of course, and the fact that they got that they, of course, then passed to remote working, and there were then new solutions like Jabber, which is also linked to Cisco, and they got WebEx and this kind of solution. So there were a lot of new equipment, new solutions to work remotely, and that's what people kind of insisted on, to say, well, I mean, it's not perfect. We still have problems with connections, but actually the support was good. There were a lot of solutions that were offered relatively quickly. There was a shift to the digital and remote work that was done very quickly and relatively good. The IT were very supportive. So in general, people were relatively positive. When it comes to context, I think that there we can already see some very interesting things in the sense of what were the contexts that they could keep best compared to before the lockdown, and which ones suffered the most. And for the best ones, I mean, with the MEPs, in a way, okay, it's logical, right? So they're assistants, because of course they are the ones that they work with, they work more closely with. But then if you look at the worst ones, it's other MEPs. And I think that that's already very telling, that that they had difficulties keeping contact with their peers, right? So with the people that they are supposed to work with. And of course, also a representative of national parliaments and secretariats of other political groups. But I think that most of them said, okay, so I actually struggle to keep in contact with other MEPs. Is already very telling. And for MEP assistants, it's a bit the same, right? So that okay, so that the people who are in their bubble, so their own MEP and the people in their office, that was okay. But once it got out of this bubble, and then it was about, contacting assistants of other MEPs or keeping in contact with other MEPs, that suffered. And for both secretariats, so the EP General Secretariat and the political group secretariats, that was a bit the same, right? So that they could keep good contacts within the bubble, but when it got outside the bubble, then that suffered, and they struggled to do that. And that's something that came up also in quite a few interviews, and also in some of the comments that we got in the survey, to say, well, we actually managed to keep this kind of team spirit and teamwork and so on, but once you got out of the team, once you got out of our immediate colleagues, that's been very difficult. About influence, I mean, of course, we have very few answers, but still, I mean, it's quite, I think it's quite noticeable that most MEPs say that, they have the feeling that their contributions to the decisions have been worse than if they were present. And that the influence of the European Parliament has decreased. I mean, and this we've asked also in interviews, and we have got a bit of mix outcomes there. Yeah, some people saying, no, actually we've managed to keep the influence, and some people say, well, no, actually, yes, it was all about rubber stamping and we couldn't really say anything. So there's probably more research that needs to be done here. And for the internal organization, so when we ask about, how do they feel that their working style has changed, most of them said, well, it's more intense, right? So it's actually got much more intense. And if we went then a little bit more into it, and then, we asked this question of like, okay, can you please explain us what you mean with this, where has been like positive impact and negative impact. And again, I've done a word cloud here to see some of the main issues coming up. And I could say, I mean, I did this in the last couple of days, a content analysis of this question. And out of the around kind of, 300 items that I coded as either positive or negative impact, so around 200 were negative and 100 were positive. And the positive ones were mostly all the time things like, well, it's good that the parliament is now digitalized, that we are now teleworking, and that we don't have to travel, and also both in terms of saving time and also, of course, CO2. So for the environment, this is good. And negative was mostly, well, it's less efficient, we have more workload, we have more pressure, we cannot separate the private and the private life and our work. It's difficult to combine with family. So these were the things that came up most. And it's more difficult to plan, it's more difficult to keep track of what is going on, and it's very difficult to know what is going on beyond our team. So that's where it also came up. So just to conclude, I mean, and this is all very impressionistic at the moment, because, you know, as I was saying, I mean, probably there has to be a little bit of a reflection, more kind of theoretical reflection. And if you have ideas, I would be very happy about, you know, if you can share them. But my first impressions now, kind of having examined now that the responses of the survey, and also having done these interviews, is that, I mean, everybody stresses this, that there was a rapid adaptation, which was relatively successful. So that compared, for instance, to national parliaments, the European Parliament ensured this would, and this we keep hearing in this idea of business continuity, so that they could ensure that Parliament continued working. And so that the legislative work was not stopped, and we've seen it before with what Carlos has presented, also all these MFF decisions and so on, so that there the Parliament could actually participate and could continue to do its job there. But at the same time, I mean, they've been so focused on this rapid adaptation and how to adapt and how to find solutions and how to adapt to teleworking and to find digital solutions and so on, that we see both in the surveys and also speaking to people that it's a very kind of inward looking stance. So I mean, my idea at the beginning was to say, well, you know, what's the role now of the European Parliament in all of this? And we keep asking it, right? So what's the impact for interinstitutional relations? What's the impact for legislative work? What's the impact for budgetary negotiations? And they keep coming to, you know, small points, nitty-gritty, organizational issues. So it's very difficult to really have debates or to make them discuss these bigger points of like democracy and debates. I mean, they will tell you, like, yeah, of course the debates are not as good. Yeah, of course this is all suffering, but it's very difficult to really let, you know, have people who have like these broader stances. What we've also noticed is that, well, you know, the responses at the beginning were very positive in terms of like, well, you know, it's been good and it's been quick and there's been a rapid adaptation. But that there is now slowly a lockdown fatigue because there's no perspective on when is this going to finish. And a lot of pressure, especially from the MEPs on the staff, so on assistants, on the secretariats and so on, to keep working, keep visible, which of course doing it all in distance and not there and not connected, it makes for a lot more work for all these kind of behind the scenes actors that we usually do not see. And what does come out is how important things that we kind of take for granted often when we talk about the Parliament and so on, is how important the issue of multilingualism has been now for this business continuity. Almost everybody has mentioned the issue of interpretation. And it might seem very technical, but it's actually one of the cornerstones of participation, right? So if you cannot have interpretation as an MEP and you're not good in languages, you don't speak English, you don't speak French, then it's extremely difficult to be kept in the loop, to continue participating in discussions. I mean, there were very reduced options now for interpretation, and so it's very difficult then to be actually effective, yeah, because you don't have your assistant next to you that maybe translates or interprets for you. So it's been really visible that that language skills and the capacity to speak other languages has become really one of the main issues of whether you can now be influential or not in the European Parliament. And of course, what we already knew, but now everybody is stressing even more, is this aspect of informal context. Like all the important work happens in the Mickey Mouse bar. right? So everything happens in the Mickey Mouse bar, in corridors. That's how you keep in the loop. You know, that's how you kind of share information. That's how you keep track of what is going on in other areas. So this is what people are missing most, and what is affecting also in all these kind of negotiations inside the European Parliament. And so the question is, of course, in the long term, what it also means, right? For the working methods of the European Parliament in terms of, okay, more digitalization, but maybe also more MEPs also being more away from the European Parliament, because they say like, well, you know, why should I go and travel to Brussels for a 1-hour meeting, right? I'll stay at home and do it from home, which of course might be good or bad, depending, right? But we see especially a big disruption of networks, both within the European Parliament, but also with external actors, interest representations, national parliaments. And of course, also a thing that has been coming up, and I think it's important and it needs to be looked into a bit more carefully, is the fact that this European Parliament had just started to work, and that there were lots of newcomers, right? So there's also an issue of trust in all of this disruption to the networks and the informal context and so on that probably needs to be explored further. Okay, I'll leave it here. And if there are questions or comments, then please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Many thanks, Ariadna, for this very nice presentation. Well, any comments? I think Michael wants to participate. Yes, Michael.
Oh, yeah, sure. Many thanks for this presentation. I mean, you don't know how, I mean, my current role, Adriana knows it, but my current role is a lot about managing. And it's so good to have conversations about science. I mean, it's wonderful. So congratulations to your workshops. And again, apologies for that I'm so late. And my comments is a bit, yeah, I mean, you remember when we went all in the lockdown, and then I, with one research team, we also had this idea to make a survey, and we did. And then we realized that 500,000 other people really wanted to do surveys on their pet institutions. We actually tried a commission, but with a question of not similar, but with a survey, but it didn't work out. Just to say this, that it's very good that you got this endorsement and this data. You shouldn't be apologetic about it. It's very good to have this data, and you should also not be too timid. I mean, should or not, I mean, I wouldn't be so timid with what you can reach from it. I'm not sure. Now here's my suggestion, and as a comment, more as a question, but something I would like to push you to, because I see this already somehow in the data, and I would not let go not being analytical about it, because you have a fantastic question of this kind of interesting impact of the lockdown and this kind of you call it informality, but I see a question of the distribution of power that goes along with it. And you showed me, even though maybe I overinterpret, but I see what you tell me. I would look for a double shift of power, namely one that may go to the assistants and to the administration, and the other one is away from the European Parliament to other actors at the European level, namely the Commission and the member states. And my hypothesis would be here, and I would push you on the theoretical side. My hypothesis would be that, you know, there is an incoherence problem that the European Parliament has anyway, and that kind of comes out now much bigger, because he can only act if it gets coherence. And what you say about informality is precisely means to that coherence. And if this is like in the lockdown, they cannot play this anymore, they are disadvantaged against institutions that are more hierarchical, or their own administration maybe. So I see a bit of very interesting question, a political sensitive, very important question about the redistribution of power that seems to be able to, that your data seems able to give some answers to. And I would encourage you to think more in these analytical terms about it. All this other stuff that they're tired or feel fine or not. I mean, we all have it. We know it. It comes in all surveys somehow, one way or another. But maybe this is the angle that that would make this paper, or this, I don't know what you want to do with this paper, with this data, would give you a great kind of attendance to what you're doing. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. More comments? Yes, Alexandra.
Yeah, I have a very quick comment. Can you hear me well? Because I don't have my headphones. Okay. So just very quickly, yeah, this is very interesting, Ariadna. And I was just wondering one thing that, or maybe I missed it, but I was wondering about the kind of different outcomes depending on gender. And because we have seen like there is emerging research on the very negative impact for women. So I was wondering like whether that could be one of the kind of perspectives for your article, because, you know, European Parliament supposedly is, you know, very concerned with gender mainstreaming, etc. So I don't know if you can already tell us something about that. Yeah, but yeah, I think this is a very interesting project, and well done for doing that.
If I may?
Alexandra, yes, Nacho, come on.
Okay, yes, a very short question about, well, I was thinking about to compare with other institutions, and I think that European Council will be really very interesting, because it's probably an institution in which the pattern of, I mean, behavior, exchange of view in the corridors among leaders, they alone in the room have changed with all these summits during the lockdown, and they with a high pressure, I mean, very politicized, this high politics decision to be taken during the crisis, much more than in the European Parliament. And I think that it will be very, very interesting to compare with other institutions, and particularly with the European Council. I don't know if you are thinking about to do that. But by the way, congratulations. I think really very, very timely. It's impossible to do a more timely research on this topic. So congrats.
Thank you, Nacho. Clement?
Yeah, I just follow up a very brief question, because like I found this research super interesting, and I wonder if you studied the case of trust, because one of the main impact I would imagine from going online and having this kind of negotiation within political parties, but also across institutions, is how much they trust the networks in which, and what kind of information can they channel actually, because it not only it may have an impact on the processes, but also on the substance of the negotiation. So I wonder if this is something that you studied as well.
Mario, thank you, Clement. Mario?
Yeah, okay, thanks. So I'm also impressed by your data and by your research. We tried to analyze also a little bit how the COVID-19 affected the regional parliaments in Spain. And so I found also some parallel conclusions with your research, mainly saying that the interpersonal contact among MPs are really important. But our research also, but we found also out that MPs mentioned that the relation to the constituencies improved quite a lot. So of course, the European Parliament is quite different, but I think you didn't mention these relations to the electorate or to the voter at home. My question is also if there have been some innovations in their working methods. So I know the German Bundestag started or had to start to vote electronically, and but I assume that the European Parliament was much more advanced in these kind of working methods.
Thank you, Mario. Any other issue? Well, I would like to say two things. One is that, yeah, I think it's a very nice research. I wouldn't be so worried about the rate of a response, because I think you have a very high rate of response of the EP General Secretary, which are, I think, far away the best experts in the EP. And this is, I think this is the people who really know how things work in the EP. So probably it's much more interesting what they can say than whatever MPs can say. I'm sure about that. I have this experience interviewing people in the EP, okay? Maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, that is my perception. And in terms of theory development of the paper, I would agree with Michael and what you said, Ariadna, before. I think also in the literature, I mean, there is a lot of things about informal decision making in the EP, and I think now is the time, because I mean, in crisis times things change, and the issue here is to what extent could actually emerge some kind of other kind of well, of interaction or procedures that could be used not just now in the crisis but also in the future. Okay, so I think well, of course, I mean, there are many different ways to introduce theory or to try to test different issues, but certainly I think this is one of the, from my perspective, one of the most interesting issues you could have a look. And you already know so much about all these things in the EP, so you are the right person to do it. So I would say yes, this Ariadna. Well, I don't know if anyone else wants to add something. Otherwise, we'll just give floor to Ariadna basically to answer.
Yeah, just quickly.
Yes, Felipe?
Yeah, just one quick question, because I was wondering if you could, I know that your sample of MPs that responded is small, but I was wondering if you could check whether those that have more experience, those that have served in previous terms, and not only for MPs, but also for assistants or secretariats that have been for a longer period of time in the EP, has behaved differently. So in the same sense that gender may be a differential factor here, I think experience may be too. One, because experience may MPs more effective. And the second one, it's connected with what previous commenters were saying about social trust. So there are some studies, especially in finance, that they are telling that teleworking is working best for the already established team because the social trust can be maintained over time. But with MEPs, in which you have constantly renew rates, that could be a factor. And I was thinking not only for MPs but also for assistants. I don't know if you could have data on that for the survey.
Okay, so just let me see if I can go through all of this. Yes, thank you, Michael, for these comments. It's really helpful. I mean, I was already kind of trying to go into this direction, and I've been asking this question, especially from political groups, about how do you keep the group cohesive? How do you manage if people are not around? And also, especially, you know, these big decisions on CAP and MFF and so on. So how do you build a parliament position? And they've been all relatively, I mean, they've just said, we got there, it just took more time. So it just, I mean, in the end, we manage. So I'm probably the results are not that different from what they would have been, but it just took longer. So more efforts for everybody, and it was less efficient. But and that also comes to some of the other questions about like informality and so on. What I've also realized is that there's an aspect there of concentration of powers, of the usual suspects, so the usual relay actors who already have more power within the European Parliament, so rapporteurs, shadows, coordinators, and so on, getting even more power because, of course, things have to be kept in even smaller groups. And then, of course, it's like the group leaders and these kind of people with some sort of positions who, in the end, make the big decisions. And then it's a question of like, okay, how much do the others actually get to know about this and to share these decisions and so on. And that's been one of the main issues that we've seen until now, so that there is an even further concentration of powers, and that the dialogue then reporting back to committees and letting committees debate and talk and so on, that has almost completely disappeared. And I think that that's probably something that I'm going to try and explore more and talk maybe to more people in committees, committee chairs, and so maybe they might also give me some more information about that. But I think that might be indeed an interesting avenue, also linked to this issue of trust and trust in networks, right? So that if you, in a way, you have to keep this group small so that you can create this element of trust, right? So that if you don't share the same kind of information, you don't share the same kind of or you cannot include as many people when you are online, and so of course that affects trust, and that's something that has come up, right? So that there is less trust in how to communicate and how to share information, so that not as much information is shared across people, across services, and so on. So that's come up indeed, yeah. And that kind of links also to what Felipe was saying now about experience and whether there are different kinds of MEPs and that whether they behave differently. And indeed, in slightly different ways. So on the one hand, those who have been longer in the EP have the advantage that they have these networks, right? Or that they have bigger networks. So they might know better how to work and how to liaise and who to contact and so on and so forth. But at the same time, often they are much more reluctant to change. So they are those who have either stayed in Brussels and try to continue to attend Parliament, or who are really putting a lot of pressure so that things go back to normal, or to go back to how things were in the past. While the new MEPs, which usually are also a bit younger, they have been much more flexible, like, okay, well, we don't know how things worked before, so we do things like this now. Okay, that's fine for us, right? So that's been a bit of a difference there. But of course, they have the problem that they don't know each other. They don't know their colleagues, they don't know people in their committees. So that of course, again, affects the issue of trust, right? What else? Yes, so about gender, it's a good point. We'll check it out. We still have to kind of, in a way, check, what's the impact of, for instance, age or nationality or gender and so on our answers. So this is something that I wanted to check indeed and see. But of course, yeah, many women that we've interviewed and we've talked to, of course, underlining the issue of family and family life and taking care of kids, homeschooling and so forth. Yeah, so that's been an issue that's come up often. About the relation with constituencies, so there is indeed a debate opening up there, in the sense that it's been more difficult to keep track of constituencies or with citizens, because of course the usual ways, for instance, of political groups interacted with constituencies, that has dissolved, right? So all these kind of meetings and inviting people over to the European Parliament for visits, that doesn't exist. So they've had to come up with new ideas of like doing some sort of virtual conferences, and it's a learning process. So they said like, oh, the first ones we did, they were really crap, and then the second ones were a bit better. And so yes, it's a learning process. They've done more work on social media, of course, but they don't know whether this is actually working or not. So they don't know whether people are paying more attention to them or not. But there is a debate opening up about virtual tools giving the chance for MEPs to spend more time in their constituencies, and then having maybe some sort of like hybrid weeks where they are back in their constituencies and then they have committee meetings, for instance, or other kinds of meetings online, right? So that they can spend more time back home. But it's extremely controversial, and not everybody is on the same page. Some people don't want it because they are afraid that then MEPs won't go to Brussels anymore, or that they, yeah. So it's a bit of a big discussion also between the different groups, and also with administration. And about innovations in the working methods, yeah, indeed. I mean, the European Parliament was actually one of the first to really move to remote voting. So they created, well, first it was basically just per email. So emailing the voting decisions, which took ages. And then they moved and created a new app, both for plenary voting. And now they are also developing another app for committee voting, because the systems are a bit different. It was a bit controversial because it's based on Apple technology and not everybody was happy with it. But also, there's been a lot of innovation also in terms of creating ways of like hybrid participation in committees and meetings and how to incorporate interpretation. They've developed this interaction system where basically it's a bit like Zoom or WebEx and so on, but with interpretation in there, and it's kind of an own system for the European Parliament, though some of the other institutions might also adopt it in the future. But still, you know, it's not working properly always. The possibilities for interpretation are limited. So yeah, so it's not perfect. Yeah, and with about comparing with other institutions, that could be really good. And I already had like some people saying, well, you know, it's important to do that, especially with council, as you said, because I mean, they've moved really to doing everything through the writing, the written procedure, right? So they don't even meet. I mean, they just do everything by email or whatever, or written, right? So it's much worse than in a way than the European Parliament in terms of debates and face-to-face meetings. So that could be really interesting. But I think that then for that I could need, you know, like a proper project with money and PhDs or postdocs or whatever that support me, because it's really, I mean, it's very data intensive, right? So it's not something that you do on the sides. So, but yeah, but it's fascinating. And if anyone is interested, then I'm open for ideas and collaboration. But thank you a lot for all these comments and ideas.
Okay, so this is 5 o'clock. This is as we expected
I feel really
to finish. So, well, just to say thank you very much to everyone, particularly to all of you, because you have been from the beginning to the end. And also for the rest of the people that they couldn't be for the rest of the time. So I hope that you like it, this online version of this small conference, okay? And I hope also that next year we could do it in Barcelona, just in live, okay? I would be very glad, or in Madrid or wherever. I mean, I say in Barcelona because we have already some tradition to do it here, but it would be also good to do it somewhere else. That is always nice. And I think the discussions have been very nice in general terms. I think we have provided some nice feedback to all presentations, okay? And also we have know basically what is doing everyone, which is always nice and good. And yes, I don't know if you want to add something else, it's fine. Otherwise, Michael, you are welcome to our next meeting as well.
Yeah, thanks. And now I understand. I was wondering, I mean, who's doing a workshop so close before Christmas? But now I understand you have still time to Epiphany to buy your present. So that's why you can be generous at that stage of the year. But very, very kind of, yeah, good work
yes, because we are still
get the people to work at that stage. Yeah.
We don't have in Barcelona or in Spain quarantine as you have in Germany. So we can actually get out to buy some presents for Christmas time, okay? At least at the moment, I don't know for how long, but this is how things work so far. Okay, so thanks again, and well, happy Christmas, and I'll see you around, and I will see you soon, okay?
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
Thank you very much.
All
Bye-bye.
the best.
Bye to
Merry Christmas,
everybody.
Happy New Year. Nos vemos en Barcelona o en Madrid.
Adeu.
Abrazo.
Fiestas a todas y todos.
Grande
Gracias,
abrazo.
Adeu.
Ew.
Adiós.
Micrófono ahí
¿Esto?
abajo. Sí, ahora sí.
Sí, es que tenía la voz quita. Es que quería comentar una cosa, Alexandra, pero bueno, que ya está, tío, ya hemos acabado. Yo estoy rendido y agotado. Y encima ahora tengo otra reunión, o sea que...
¿Cómo te has podido meter otra reunión después de...?
No, porque este tío no podía en otro momento y es una cosa importante. Bueno, da igual. Bueno, en general ha salido bien, ¿no?
Sí, hombre, sí. Yo lo único que pienso es que ojalá no nos toque nunca más hacerlo online, pero a lo mejor... Ahí está Andrea.
Adea, yo quiero una habitación como la tuya, macho. Si parece que estás en un palacio florentino del siglo XVII, ¿pero qué es eso?
Hombre, yo quiero que los estudiantes, cuando me escuchan, puedan ver también un par de mapas históricos para su...
Pero tío, te has cambiado de casa. Yo cuando estuve en tu casa no vi esto, cabrón.
Estamos todos aquí, desde este lado hasta esto no te lo puedo enseñar porque...
No me lo creo, no me lo creo. Te has ido a vivir a Valcarca, la zona buena de Barcelona, cabrón.
Exacto, ya me conoces, ya me... Vaya maratón, pero bueno, os felicito a los dos.
Pero tenías razón, Aurea, se hace muy pesado, tío. 6 horas se hacen muy pesadas porque es muy intensivo y tienes que prestar mucha atención y acabas muy cansado.
Pensaba mucho peor, Javier. La verdad que, mira, tenía todos los miedos porque 7 horas online es una locura.
Una locura, sí, sí.
Es una locura. Sin embargo, ha fluido más de lo esperado, la verdad.
Una única opción para el futuro podría ser, ojalá ya no toque hacerlo online y tal, hacerlo en 2 días, 3 y 3, o 2 tardes o 2 mañanas, ¿sabes?
Yo creo que con que ahora los seminarios online, los webinars, más de 2 horas no se hacen porque la gente no es difícil aguantar. En este caso, como más o menos el círculo reducido, parecía más una reunión de trabajo donde podías entrar y salir y más o menos yo he podido trabajar un poco y el resto he seguido, o sea, no... Pero sí, o sea, al final tienes que dedicar todo un día y es largo. Más que nada para quien tiene que estar fijo todas las 7 horas. Esto sí.
Sí, a mí se me ha hecho un poco pesado, la verdad. Pero bueno, yo creo que en general ha salido bien.
Sí, la verdad que...
En línea de los seminarios que hemos hecho otras veces, que la gente participa mucho y yo creo que hace comentarios de calidad, más o menos, incluso sin haberse leído los papers, porque hay papers... el único paper que me he leído en serio es el que era el reviewer, ¿no? Los otros... Pero bueno, que decir, o sea, me los había ojeado, no me ha dado tiempo de leérmelos enteros, pero yo creo que en general los comentarios son... Sigo pensando que son bastante mejores que los que suele haber en los congresos, ¿no? O sea que...
Por eso es más una sesión de trabajo, es más un momento en el cual sabes que más o menos hay más tiempo y menos formalidad para poder debatir temas y ¿no? Los comentarios son interesantes. Creo que es el valor añadido de quien tenga algo que presentar.
Andrea, te voy a contratar para que me decores una habitación de mi casa como la tuya, porque tío, yo necesito cuando me conecto con gente importante tener un fondo como el que tienes tú, cabrón.
Mira, te compras un mapa.
No. Quiero que lo pongas tú, porque claro, lo que no voy a aparecer es como Francesco con el árbol de Navidad de fondo. Eso sí que no. Eso sí que no.
A mí me gusta.
Eso parece una casa muy estándar. Yo quiero una casa que parezca un palacete como el que vives tú, cabrón.
Bueno, te mando un par de opciones y luego cuando me dices...
Bueno. Pues nada, bueno, gracias Francesco y Andrea porque habéis estado, bueno, tú Andrea de vez en cuando veía que te tomabas un break, pero en general has estado bastante, ¿no?
No, tenía que trabajar un poco emails y varios temas y luego nada, ir a atender casa, pero en principio sí.
Oye, lo de ya que estamos aquí, ¿qué temas teníamos pendientes? Lo de la simulación, ¿ya tienes a los estudiantes o no?
Sí. Tengo 5. Han aparecido.
¿Los que te dijimos o no?
Creo que son 3 o 4 de lo que me habéis dicho, más ha aparecido un PhD student.
Vale, perfecto.
Os paso los nombres, pero muy bien, porque esto nos permite, adentro de la Learning Unit de Utopia, decir que cumplimos y no será fácil porque vamos a ver las otras universidades cuántos estudiantes traen, porque...
No, además son buenos, ¿eh? Esos que te recomendamos, los 5 que te recomendamos hicieron muy bien la simulación.
Mucho mejor, porque yo había pedido también, está Aida Torres, que es una profesora de constitucional, también que hiciera difusión al departamento, porque está metida en el proyecto también, pero al final han salido todos de vosotros, así que gracias y bien que podamos aportar ahí, porque si esperamos el resto, toda comunidad va a ser difícil.
Bueno, si sale bien, ya te pagarás, tío, una cena de estas. ¿Cómo se llama este plato italiano que me gusta tanto? De la berenjena con tomate, ¿cómo se llama eso?
¿Parmigiana?
Parmigiana.
Si sale bien, ya te pagarás una parmesana, tío.
Aquí, no.
Aquí, tío, en fin.
Yo no sé por qué estoy en el Utopia.
No veo una parmesana, vamos, ni en sueños. O sea,
ya sabes, la otra vez te enseñé a hacer un tomate decente para que pueda decir que...
Pues no lo he hecho nunca, tío. Me lo tendrás que volver a recordar porque mira que me gusta el tomate ese bien hecho, pero no... Bueno, me compré la lata esa que me dijiste tú y la verdad es que es un buen...
Para empezar, olvida el tomate frito que no sirve de nada. Si tienes un gato, si tienes un perro, le puedes dar, pero olvídate del tomate frito. En Italia no se vende, es prohibido.
No, pues esa marca que me recomendaste es buena, tío.
Sí, sí.
No me acuerdo ahora cuál era la marca, pero...
Pero de tomate fresco, de tomate normal.
Sí,
Sí, claro. Empezamos por los básicos. Si el tomate es bueno, la pasta ya tiene más opciones. Si el tomate es malo...
Bueno, a ver si nos haces un taller. En vez de un seminario de temas europeos, vamos a hacer un taller de pasta. Bien, de principio a final, tío.
La próxima vez intercalamos con un clips de...
No, porque la clave está en el tomate, tío, no está en la pasta, está en el tomate. Si te sale una buena salsa de tomate abundante...
Los ingredientes son todos.
Sí, pero el tomate es el alma mater de ese plato, yo lo tengo clarísimo. Pero bueno, ¿alguna otra cosa pendiente? Lo de Conchi. Y tú ya lo tenéis preparado, ¿no?
24 profesores que se han apuntado para la actividad y aún van entrando cada día, ¿eh?
Ahora te vas a hacer famoso entre todo el profesorado catalán, tío.
Un éxito.
Te van a conocer, de aquí a 10 años te vas a conocer a todos los profesores de Cataluña, macho.
Para mis hijos, si necesitan notas.
Tú y la Conchi, que además a la Conchi esto le encanta y le va, o sea, que es que yo creo que hacéis una pareja, tío, perfecta.
Conchi es un volcán, ¿Está bien de los ojos, Francesco?
Sí, yo
¿Se ha recuperado?
Con ella, ya se ha recuperado, ha ido mejor de lo que se esperaban y se ha curado mucho más rápido. De hecho, he estado trabajando los últimos días, aunque le habían dicho no hacerlo. Pero bueno, Conchi es Conchi, le gusta demasiado para quedarse lejos de la pantalla. Pero bien, está activa, todo bien, ningún problema.
Okay.
Vale.
Bueno, chicos, pues nada, yo os dejo porque tengo ahora otra reunión ahí cuarto, ¿vale?
¿Te quedas aquí o te vas a Zaragoza?
Me voy a Zaragoza, sí. Bueno, si me dejan, espero que me dejen estos cabrones porque...
Yo me he perdido la última, porque dice que hoy anunciaban más restricciones.
No, pero para familiares y alegados no hay problemas.
No.
Exactamente. Ok.
Vale.
Bueno, oye, pues nada, que vaya muy bien y ya nos vemos el año que viene. Bueno, a ti te hablaremos antes.
Felices fiestas.
A ti cuídate, ¿vale?
Intentaré.
Venga, chao.
Chao a todos. Chao.
Un abrazo.
Leo.